Chapter 16:15. Yi Qianshan was speechless. Sure enough, everything beautiful was just an illusion. Yi Qianshan wore a look of disdain when she heard that. Soon he closed his eyes and breathed evenly. After Shinjilia said that, he didn't dare to look down. The elevator had just reached the first floor, and Yi Qianshan had already fallen asleep? Shinjilia was amused and disappointed at the same time. Shinjilia didn't know what kind of complicated emotions he was feeling. As he held her, he felt that the woman in his arms was incredibly light. He weighed it and estimated that it was less than 50 kilograms. As the saying goes, those who weigh less than 100 pounds are either flat-chested or short. This Yi Qianshan, he glanced at her chest. It was a tragic sight. He imagined her height again. She seemed to only reach his chin. This was too tragic. Flat-chested and short. In the future he might not even have enough milk to feed his children. Moreover, with his height, if he didn't find a taller one, he wouldn't be able to make up for the height of his descendants. Shinjilia suddenly began to sympathize with Yi Qianshan's future husband. He shook his head and muttered, "Life's greatest tragedy." Yi Qianshan didn't know if she heard it, but her body wriggled a little, but she quickly fell asleep again. Shinjilia glanced at her indifferently and didn't seem to mind. He carried her to the side of the road and waited for an empty car. A taxi soon arrived. Shinjilia got into the car and threw Yi Qianshan into the back seat. He went up and let her head rest on his knees. "Master, let's go to the hospital." The driver took a look and asked, "Outpatient department?" "Yes." Then the driver slowly drove away. Yi Qianshan was sleeping soundly on Shinjilia's lap. The more he rubbed his head against the wall, the hotter his body became. Yi Qianshan could clearly feel that her body was burning terribly, and it was getting colder and colder. Shinjilia looked at her and said, "Sir, please turn off the air conditioner. She's running a fever." The driver took a look and switched off the air conditioner. "Aren't you hot? You're sweating." Shinjilia was indeed feeling hot. He glanced at the time and saw that it was already noon, the time when the sun was at its strongest. "It's okay. Drive faster, thank you." Yi Qianshan was oblivious to it. She hugged his waist and nuzzled her face closer and closer to him. Shinjilia shifted his body uncomfortably and reached out to cover her face to prevent her from going any further. The driver snickered and said, "Girlfriend?" "No, a friend." "Oh." The driver understood. He glanced at the rearview mirror and said with a faint smile, "Then you're really nice to your friend." There was a deeper meaning to her words. Shinjilia looked out the window and pretended not to understand. The taxi suddenly braked. Both of them, who were in the back seat, were caught off guard and their bodies lurched forward. Shinjilia's first reaction was to cry out in surprise. He reached out and held Yi Qianshan's head to protect it. The car quickly came to a stop. The driver rolled down the window and cursed, "Are you blind? Do you want to die?" Yi Qianshan had also woken up. She turned her head to look at Shinjilia. However, when he turned his head, he suddenly realized what he was using as a pillow. Yi Qianshan was taken aback and blinked her eyes. He immediately turned around and sat up, saying, "Have we arrived?" "Soon," the driver replied. "School is over at this time, so there's a little traffic jam. We'll be fine once we pass this section." Chapter 16:16. The road was soon cleared. The car sped up and arrived at the hospital in just a few minutes. Yi Qianshan found it difficult to walk, but she still slowly got out of the car. Shinjilia quickly went forward and helped her up. Yi Qianshan lowered her head slightly and said guiltily, "I can walk on my own." Shinjilia looked at her with disdain and said, "What are you doing? Walk properly. If you can't walk, just walk properly. Who's going to laugh at you?" As he spoke, he pulled Yi Qianshan into his arms and said, "I'll help you walk." Yi Qianshan felt as if the world was spinning around her as her body was being hugged tightly. She straightened her back and leaned on his shoulders, saying, "I can't walk." Shinjilia had already anticipated this. He half carried and half supported her as they walked into the hospital. Today was Saturday, so there were a lot of people. Shinjilia registered her for the emergency department and found someone he knew before putting her on an 4-drip. His fever was 39 degrees and his face was red. After Yi Qianshan was hooked up to the 4-drip, she sprawled on the bed and fell asleep. Yi Qianshan didn't know if she was dreaming or what, but she kept going on and on. Her brows were tightly furrowed, and she was muttering something that no one knew what she was saying. Yi Qianshan wasn't the only one in the temporary ward. The commotion attracted the attention of others. Shinjilia's expression remained the same as he sat by the side and stared at the water. When it was almost empty, he asked the nurse to come in and replace it. 2 hours had passed after 3 to 4 packs of water. Yi Chanshan was in a deep sleep. It was as if she didn't know the difference between day and night. He didn't sleep soundly. Instead, it was obvious that he had been plagued by nightmares. After removing the needle, Shenjilia didn't bother shaking Yi Chanshan awake. Instead, he carried her in his arms. She weighed less than 50 kilograms, but in Shenjilia's hands she felt as light as a feather. Yi Chanshan was shorter than Yu Lily, but Yu Lily didn't seem to be that light. Humph, as expected, there is a difference in weight between a single woman and a single woman. Shenjilia muttered to himself as he carried her down the stairs. The surroundings were noisy, and his body was suspended in the air. Yi Chanshan felt that she was about to ascend. She was in a very wonderful state. His bones were itching and so was his heart. At the same time there was also a sweet and warm feeling in his heart. An indescribable magical feeling filled his heart. His body felt warm and cozy. When he opened his eyes he was on his own bed. Yi Chanshan looked around. She was exhausted. He sat up, but before he could do so, he heard a voice beside him. "You're awake." The man's voice was undoubtedly Shenjilia's. Yi Chanshan sat up straight. Surprisingly, she wasn't frightened at all. She stared at Shenjilia in a daze. After a long time he finally replied, "Didn't we go to the hospital? Why was he at home now? You're sleeping like a pig. You wouldn't even know that you were being sold," Shenjilia said with a look of disdain. "I made some porridge. Have some." "I don't want to eat it." Yi Chanshan was a little resistant. "It's already past 3 in the afternoon. If I don't eat now, I'm going to become an immortal." Shenjilia closed the book in his hand and stood up. "Go wash your face. It's covered in saliva. It's so dirty." Yi Chanshan froze and immediately reached out to touch her face. There was really saliva. Watching him close the door, Yi Chanshan snorted. She immediately got up, put on her shoes and hopped toward the bathroom. After a good night's sleep, Yi Chanshan felt much better. There was a tingling pain on the back of her hand. It was a sign of a drip. That meant that they had really gone to the hospital. Could it be that Shenjilia had carried her back? Chapter 16-17. Yi Chanshan brushed her teeth and washed her face. His mood was inexplicably in a mess. Strangely, it wasn't good, but it wasn't bad either. When she walked out, Shenjilia was sitting on the sofa playing with his phone. When he saw her come out, he turned off his phone and stood up. The moment Yi Chanshan saw him, she immediately thought that he was the one who had carried her back from the hospital. Her heart throbbed. Yi Chanshan didn't dare to look at him. She shifted her gaze to the dining table. There were 2 bowls on the table and on top of them was a bowl of smoky porridge. It looked, smelled and tasted delicious. Although Shenjilia's culinary skills weren't as good as Yu Lily's, there was no doubt that he was better than other men. Yi Chanshan sat down on a chair. When she saw him sit down she asked, "You haven't eaten yet?" "I ate a little and I'm hungry again." Shenjilia didn't stand on ceremony. He picked up a spoon and handed it to her. Then he also picked up a spoon and slowly drank it. The porridge was very hot. Yi Chanshan was sweating profusely after eating less than half a bowl. She fanned herself with her hand and said, "It's such a hot day. Turn on the air conditioner." When she looked up, Shenjilia was also sweating profusely. When she heard that, she rejected him and said bluntly, "No. F***ck. You look very hot. Be careful not to get a heat stroke." Shenjilia looked at her with disdain and said, "Do you think everyone is like you? You must have run a fever because the air conditioner was too low last night." Yi Chanshan was angry and said, "If it weren't for you, would I be in this state now? Hey, can you be a little more reasonable? Why are you blaming me for everything? Did I make you catch a cold?" "Yes," Yi Chanshan said matter-of-factly. "Who asked you to criticize me last night? I left my towel and hairdryer outside. I didn't want to see you, so I didn't blow dry." Shenjilia was baffled and said, "So, you caught a cold because you didn't blow dry your hair last night?" "Nonsense," Yi Chanshan said angrily. "It was all because of you." Shenjilia was skeptical when he heard that. However, he was not convinced on the surface. He said, "You blame everything on me. You have hands and feet. What's wrong with coming out to get a towel? It's your good fortune to show me such a handsome face." "Bah. Whoever wants to look can look. I'm bored to death. Moreover, no, handsome." Shenjilia replied, "My heart aches that you've gone blind at such a young age." Yi Chanshan was so angry that smoke was coming out of her mouth. She retorted, "F***ck your blindness. I'm worried that your future girlfriend will be blind to fall for a guy like you." When Shinjilia saw how angry she was, he didn't care that he was being scolded. Instead he said proudly, "It doesn't matter. If I can't find a girlfriend, I'll just find a boyfriend. Anyway, with my looks, I'm different from a blind man like you." The way Shinjilia stroked his hair and winked at her smugly made Yi Chanchan scream in anger. She put the spoon down and screamed, "I'm not eating anymore." With that, she stood up and turned around to leave. When Shinjilia saw that, he immediately reached out to hold her back and said, "I cooked so much. Finish it." Chapter 16:18. Hey, I'm just kidding. Let's eat first. Shinjilia grabbed her hand and pulled her towards him. He sounded a little anxious. Yi Chanchan was indeed hungry, but she got angry when she saw Shinjilia's face. She glared at him and said, "Let go. I don't want to eat any more." Shinjilia felt a headache coming on. He had no choice but to show weakness and said, "Sir, do me the honor and eat some." When Yi Chanchan saw his expression, she snorted and said, "You've gone too far with your words." "Yeah, I was wrong. I shouldn't have said such a big truth." Yi Chanchan became even more furious and said, Hey, okay. I was wrong. Hurry up and eat. Aren't you hungry?" Shinjilia looked helpless and said, "Don't turn on the air conditioner. Just finish eating. Take some medicine and go back to sleep." "Do you think I'm a pig?" Shinjilia asked. "Are you going to eat or not?" Yi Chanchan was indeed hungry. When she heard that, she sat down and continued eating. But the more she ate, the hotter she felt. She glanced at Shinjilia and realized that he wasn't any better. However, she was sick, but he wasn't. On such a hot day, he could easily get a heat stroke. Yi Chanchan felt a little bad. How could this guy be so stupid? She didn't force him to eat with her. Why did he have to torture himself on such a hot day? He made it seem like she was the one abusing a child. How was she supposed to deal with this? After thinking about it, Yi Chanchan asked, "Aren't you feeling hot?" Shinjilia wiped the sweat off his forehead and said, "What do you think?" "Then turn on the air conditioner." "No. I have to go back to the hospital later." "Isn't it Saturday today? Do you have to work overtime?" "Yeah." Shinjilia finished the last mouthful of porridge and said, "There's a patient who came back from abroad. I have to go over." "Oh," Yi Chanchan replied. She was burning up. "The appointment was supposed to be in the morning, but you weren't feeling well in the morning, so I took you to get a drip. I had to let her wait until the afternoon." It was obvious that he was here to claim credit. Yi Chanchan snorted angrily and ignored him. Shinjilia wiped his mouth and said, "In that case, I'm going to the hospital. You mustn't turn on the air conditioner. When you shower, you have to take a hot bath. Remember to take your medicine. The medicine is at the head of your bed, along with some mineral water. Just take it." All right. Let's go." Yi Chanchan waved her hand impatiently. Shinjilia wasn't in a hurry. He took his time in the bathroom to take a cold shower before leaving the house refreshed. Yi Chanchan washed the dishes, wiped them clean, and placed them in the disinfecting cabinet. When she heard the sound of Shinjilia leaving the room, she had a strange feeling in her heart. Shinjilia seemed to treat her quite well. Although sometimes he was as annoying as an old mother, he still cared about her. It was just that his mouth was too cheap. She walked into the room and saw the mineral water and medicine that Shinjilia had mentioned. "What are you going to do?" After taking the medicine, Yi Chanchan took a shower and soon began to feel sleepy. She fell onto the bed and suddenly she thought of something. He got up and called his sister. Yi was a little busy that day. When she received Yi Chanchan's call, she was cooking. Li Jinan was sitting on the sofa. When he saw that it was Yi Chanchan, he called out, "It's Yi Chanchan." Chapter 16:19. Soon. Li Jinan answered the call. Yi Chanchan's voice quickly came from the other end. "Hello, Yu?" Li Jinan lazily leaned back on the sofa and replied, "Yu is cooking." When Yi Chanchan heard that, she heaved a sigh of relief and asked, "Are you all right now? How is Shenluo Han?" "Shenluo and has been locked up. He'll be in court tomorrow." Li Jinan retracted his lazy attitude and said, "From the looks of it, it's unlikely that he'll be released." When Yi Chanchan heard that, she was a little happy and said, "That's great. He's a scumbag. For such a person to be locked up, it's simply too satisfying." Li Jinan was silent when he heard that. Yes, a person like Shenluo and was finally locked up. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion. However, this was not a consequence that Shenluo and should have to bear. All of this was for Yi Yu. If it hadn't been for Shenluo, and Yi Yu would have been the one inside. Yi Chanchan didn't notice anything amiss with Li Jinan at all. She continued, This man doesn't have the slightest sense of responsibility. Regardless of whether it's toward our Yu Shin Manting, or that dead B** Tsh, he doesn't have the slightest intention of taking responsibility. It's a good thing that scum is locked up. But why is he locked up? Yi Qianshan had been in Kingstown for the past few days. She had mentioned going to the capital to help out, but Li Jinan and Yi Zhenhua had persuaded her to change her mind. Indeed, Li Jinan lived up to everyone's expectations and rescued Yi Yu. But how did Shen Luo and end up being locked up for no reason? Moreover, judging from Shen Zhilia's expression, he didn't seem to know either. He turned himself in, Li Jinan said. He told the police that he was the one who killed Guan Kui. All the evidence corroborated that. He was only taken into custody yesterday. Yu was only released yesterday as well. As Li Jinan spoke, he slowed down and said, there will be a turn for the better. He couldn't let Shen Luo and go to jail. Shen Luo and had nothing to do with this incident. If Shen Luo and were to suffer such injustice for nothing, even Li Jinan wouldn't feel good about it. Both he and Yi Yu owed Shen Luo and a favor. What? Yi Qianshan found it a little strange. This person reaped what he sowed. He could even kill his newlywed wife. Even if there's a chance to turn things around, wouldn't he have to spend at least a few decades in prison? Li Jinan was starting to get a headache. He said, it's not what you think it is. Shen Luo and wasn't the one who killed him. Of course it wasn't Yi Yu who killed him. It's highly likely that Guan Kui directed and acted it out herself. When Yi Qianshan heard that, she was confused again. She asked, Guan Kui directed and acted on her own? Was she dead or not? What's in it for her? He died but left behind a mess to torment those who are still alive. Li Jinan was filled with disdain, but he had to admit that Guan Kui had played her cards very well. At least, everyone was unhappy because of her. This experience would definitely be unforgettable for the rest of their lives. Yi Qianshan was at a loss for words. She sighed and said, it's good that Yu is fine. Let me know when you're coming back to Kingstown. I'll hold a welcome party for you. Okay. Goodbye. Li Jinan hung up the phone and looked toward the kitchen. Yu was just walking out with a bowl of soup. She had just set it down when the doorbell rang. Chapter 16:20. Although it wasn't her first time meeting her future father-in-law, she was still very nervous. She hadn't had dinner the night before, so she had woken up early to prepare. She wanted to show off her skills to Li Xiao. When she saw Li Jinan open the door, Yi Yu's heart raced. She calmed herself down and looked at the door. Li Xiao hadn't come alone. He had a handsome young man with him. Li Jianshan walked in. When he saw Li Jinan, he called out happily, Uncle. Li Jinan waved at him and said, You've grown taller again. Are you happy in the capital? Li Jianshan nodded his head and replied, Yeah. Grandpa and Grandma are very good to me. My neighbor's brother always teaches me many things. You'll get used to it. Here, do you know this person? Li Jinan turned around and pointed at Yi Yu. Li Jianshan immediately called out, Auntie? If Yi Yu had been called out to previously, she would have mumbled her response. But with Li Xiao in front of her, Yi Yu didn't dare respond. If she responded now, wouldn't it seem like she was being overly sentimental? She instinctively looked at Li Jinan. The latter raised his eyebrows and said, The child is calling you. Yi Yu laughed dryly and didn't dare respond. She waved her hand and said, Come wash your hands and let's eat. Uncle, it's time to eat. Li Xiao nodded his head and looked at the dazzling array of dishes. His sharp gaze was unreadable as he said, Thank you for your hard work, Xiao Yi. He had subtly changed the way he addressed her from Miss Yi to Xiao Yi. Although it was only a small change, it was enough to make Yi Yu happy. After serving rice to everyone, Yi Yu sat down quietly beside Li Jinan. There were 7 dishes and 1 soup. It was a sumptuous feast. Furthermore, every dish took a lot of effort to prepare. It looked, smelled, and tasted great. Just looking at it made one's thumb twitch. Li Xiao didn't stand on ceremony. He picked up his chopsticks and picked up a piece of pork rib. He had originally thought that since Yi Yu was from the north, even if the dishes she made were southern dishes, there would still be a hint of northern tastes in them. But who would have thought that after eating it, Li Xiao would feel surprised? Putting down his chopsticks, Li Xiao praised, I didn't expect little Yi to be not only good-looking but also a good cook. Not bad. Yi Yu was a little embarrassed by the compliment and replied, You're too kind, uncle. It's just some home-cooked dishes. Li Xiao didn't say anything else. He ate slowly and glanced at Li Jianshan. When Li Jianshan was with his own family, he didn't feel alienated. He took the chopsticks and reached out his short arms to pick up the food. After taking a bite of the meat, Li Jinan asked, "Is young aunt's cooking delicious?" Li Jianqian nodded immediately. "Delicious." Yi Yu smiled and picked up some food for him. She said, "Eat more if you like it. Try this." "Let him take it himself," Li Jinan said. "This guy can't even use chopsticks properly. He needs more training." When Li Jianqian heard that, he was indignant and retorted, "Who said that? I used it very well, all right? Even Grandpa and Grandma praised me." Waving his chopsticks around, Li Jianqian looked like he was showing off as he said, "Ursa still doesn't know how to use chopsticks." Chapter 16:21. Speaking of Li Jianyue, Li Jianqian felt even more upset. "I haven't seen them for a long time. I miss you so much." Li Jinan could tell. He quickly changed the topic and talked about his childhood. "When I was young, big brother and second brother liked to take me to the backyard to play with bamboo poles. Every time Auntie Li came out to chase people away, I was left alone there. The two of them ran faster than the other." Speaking of the past, Li Xiao also felt a little emotional. He couldn't help but laugh and say, "At that time, you were crying when that woman caught you. Your mother was so angry because of you. I was usually busy in the army, so it was your grandfather who caught you one by one and gave you a good beating." "How could that be? Grandpa only slapped them, not me. He just punished me to copy books." Li Jinan felt a little aggrieved. "You might as well just beat me up. Copying books is too annoying. If it wasn't for your grandfather punishing you to copy books, would you be able to write such good characters now? Their handwriting isn't bad either. Even if I don't practice, I'd still be just like them." "That's far from it. Your second brother was born with good handwriting. Not to mention your eldest brother, he's only capable of wielding swords and spears. You're almost the same, but people like you can only be taught after being beaten." Li Jinan felt a little awkward and asked, "Dad, can you save me some face in front of my wife?" Yi Yu's lips curled into a smile. When Li Xiao heard this, he laughed and said, "You three brothers, no matter who you are, you were not easy to deal with when you were young. If you don't beat them for 3 days, they'll go up the roof and tear down the tiles. Everyone is the same." Throughout the meal, Yi Yu didn't say much. However, she had heard many stories about Li Jinan's childhood. She had learned a lot. However, Yi Yu realized that during the meal, she was not feeling well at all. It seemed that the little fellow was not very happy. Li Jianqian ate and didn't talk much. From his expression, it could be seen that he was in low spirits. After dinner, Yi Yu called the little fellow over to her. She squeezed his little hand and asked, "What's wrong? Not in a good mood?" Li Jianqian shook his head. When Yi Yu saw that, she said, "Wait a moment." Yi Yu walked back to her room and took out the little gift she had bought when she was grocery shopping that afternoon. It was a crystal ball that was exquisitely crafted. There were many refractive surfaces on it, making it look extremely dazzling. I don't know if you've heard the story of the crystal ball. There was a witch who turned her 3 sons into various animals. Yi Yu looked at him and softly told the story. She said, "In the end, he used the crystal ball to break all the spells and lived happily with the princess." As she spoke, she fiddled with the crystal ball in her hand and stuffed it into his hand. "I don't know why you're unhappy, but one day there will be someone who will break all of your barriers. All of your unhappiness will be dispelled by that person." "Thank you, little aunt." Li Jianqian held the crystal ball and looked at the hundreds of himself reflected in it. "I miss my sister." As he spoke, his eyes were a little red. He raised his head and said, "Although she is very stupid and often causes me trouble, I have never been separated from her for such a long time since I was young." Chapter 16:22. When Yi Yu heard that, she reached out and rubbed his head. "That won't happen. I can't wait to admire you. Why would I embarrass you? You're a good brother." Li Jianqian lowered his head and didn't say anything. Looking at the crystal ball in his hand, his little face was expressionless. "You show the Li family." Li Jianyue hugged Xiao Su, who was still a puppy, and wailed loudly. Her tears and snot were running down her face. The golden retriever frowned, feeling wronged, and started barking along with them. Li Mosen stood in front of her helplessly and said, "Why are you crying all of a sudden? Look, even the dog is scared by you." Li Jianyue cried even louder. Her fair and tender little face was full of pink crying marks. Li Jianyue's little body trembled as she cried and said loudly, I miss my brother, sob sob sob." The little girl's voice was soft and sobbing. It reminded Li Mosen of the past few days. Li Mosen saw that the little bed next to him, which was supposed to be sleeping with someone, was suddenly empty. For the next few days, Li Mosen felt a little down. Recently when he saw Li Jianyue always laughing and playing with Xiaosu, he thought that she had forgotten. But who knew that once this kind of longing burst out, she couldn't control it. Daisu went to the imperial capital alone. Would he miss them as much as they missed him? Perhaps he would also happily play with the children in the imperial capital and forget about his duties, right? Li Mosen's heart felt empty. He went forward and pulled Li Jianyue into his arms. Don't cry. If Daisu knew that you were crying he would feel sad. Sob sob sob. Li Jianyue lay on Li Mosen's shoulder. Her tears and snot wiped on the clothes on his shoulder. Brother is very sad now. I can feel that brother is not happy. As she spoke, Li Jianyue wiped her tears and said, Mommy said that if brother doesn't want to stay in the capital, I can bring him back. The little girl seemed to have grasped a life-saving straw. She wiped her tears and sniffed hard. Mommy said that adults can't go back on their words. As he muttered to himself, he immediately got up. Hearing the baby crying, Nanny Rong was touched. His old eyes were also a little red. When he saw Li Jianyue running out barefoot, he hurriedly said, Hey, how can you run out without wearing shoes? Quickly put on your shoes before you go. Li Jianyue acted as if she hadn't heard anything. She ran straight to the phone in the living room and picked it up. Following her memory, she called Su Qianxi. Su Qianxi usually played and told stories with the children at home, but recently she had been busy in the company. Therefore, she had been staying in the company during the day. She helped Li Xiqing deal with some small things which was similar to Cheng Yu's. At this moment, when she received a call from home, she immediately thought it was Nanny Rong. He picked it up only to find that it was someone else. The sound of the little guy crying could be heard very quickly. Li Jianyue cried, Mommy, I miss my brother. Chapter 1623. Mommy, you're lying. The brother next door is on vacation. He goes home every day. Why doesn't my brother come home? Li Jianyue cried even harder. She sat on the stool and let Nanny Rong help her put on her shoes. When Su Qianxi heard this, she felt a headache coming on. She said, School is over, not vacation. Vacation is different from school. When will brother come home from school? After school, brother will go straight to grandma and grandpa's house in the capital. He won't come back to this house. Vacation means that he doesn't have to go to school for many days. Then when will brother go on vacation? After the winter vacation. Brother can come back during the winter vacation. Li Jianyue was confused, but when she heard that her brother could come back, she immediately stopped crying and said, Then Mommy, when is the winter vacation? It's around the new year. Then when is the new year? Hearing this series of questions, Su Qianxi smiled and said patiently, When Mom's birthday is over, then Daisu and Ursu's birthday is over, and when Grandpa's birthday is over, brother can come back. Li Jianyue looked defeated. She pursed her lips and wanted to cry again. She said, Brother won't come home for his birthday? Yes, he won't. Let Grandpa and Grandma celebrate it for him. Sob sob sob. Li Jianyue cried. Don't we have a vacation when we celebrate our birthdays? Mommy can celebrate our birthdays with us every year. Why can Mommy have a vacation but not brother? Brother has a vacation too. Su Qianxi was very patient. She thought for a moment and said, You're talking about the National Day holiday. When that time comes, Mommy will take you and Brother Mosen to the capital, okay? Really? Li Jianyue was excited. Her eyes were as bright as stars. The dark water was as bright as 2 crescent moons. It was beautiful. When Li Mosen saw it, he was stunned. When he met Li Jianyue's gaze, he quickly looked away, a little embarrassed. Really? Su Qianxi said. Then it's a promise. When the holidays come, you will take us to the capital. Li Jianyue cheered and finally stopped crying. She said, Does Daddy agree too? Su Qianxi smiled. Was this little girl afraid that she would say empty words and Li Xiqing would not agree? He said helplessly, Sure. Hooray. Li Jianyue was overjoyed. She blew a kiss at the phone and said, Mommy, I love you. I love you too, she whispered. I'm busy. I'll talk when I get home later. Yes, Mom. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, baby. Su Qianxi hung up and finally felt relieved. In the office, Li Xiqing looked over and said, I was going to go too. Then why didn't you tell me? Ursu is crying so pitifully. They have never been separated since they were young. Now suddenly going to the capital alone, she will definitely not be used to it. Don't you know how to comfort her? Li Xiqing continued with his work and said, Words of comfort are not as effective as actions. Staring at her with his dark eyes, Li Xiqing said, And I'm not going to take you there. Su Qianxi was upset and asked, Why? The air pressure on the plane fluctuates too much. I'm afraid of hurting the child. It's all right. Chapter 16:24. I'm just going to see my son. How is that a rush? Su Chinsi was not convinced and said, and there is still more than a month until October. It should be very stable in a month. Li Xiqing glanced at her and said, we'll talk about it when the time comes. Hearing that, Su Chinsi was so angry that her cheeks puffed up. She pushed the documents away and said, do it yourself. Li Xiqing was speechless. Putting down the documents in his hand, Li Xiqing stood up and walked toward her. Su Chinsi was sitting next to the floor-to-ceiling window with her back to him. Seeing the reflection on the floor-to-ceiling window, Su Chinsi looked at it but did not respond. Li Xiqing walked over and hugged her from behind. He whispered, are you angry? Su Chinsi did not speak, closed her eyes and leaned against the sofa. Li Xiqing looked down at her and then sat down next to her. He whispered, don't be angry. It's almost time to get off work. Let's go eat. I'm not eating with you. Su Chinsi closed her eyes and said, my daughter is waiting for me at home. She's also my daughter. Get up. Let's go eat with her. Li Xiqing gently put his hand on her shoulder and said. Su Chinsi opened her eyes and looked suspiciously at his desk that was full of documents. Can you go home now? Are you done? That's just a small matter. It's not small. The design plan and the quotation from the UK are all waiting for your reply. You haven't seen it yet, have you? As she spoke, Su Chinsi stood up and walked to her desk. She flipped her palm and quickly took out a document. Then she took out another one and said, here, you haven't finished it yet. Li Xiqing walked over and put down the document in her hand. It's a small matter. Let's go. No, you finish it first. We'll go after you're done. I'll do it tomorrow. No. Su Chinsi's attitude was very firm. Li Xiqing was helpless and said, then wait for me. Okay. Su Chinsi nodded and then picked up her tablet to search for toys that girls liked. Li Xiqing was a good person in everything. He either didn't do it or devoted himself to it. After more than an hour, Su Chinsi looked at the time and found it was already past 6 p.m. He browsed the web while eating snacks. He was not idle at all. After dealing with the work, he asked his secretary to come in and tidy up his desk. Then they left together. Su Chinsi had just found a few nice dresses. She handed them to him and asked, what do you think of these? Li Xiqing glanced at it and nodded. You have good taste, but you need to prepare more clothes for little girls. There's no need to prepare so much. Ursa can't wear them all by herself. It's a waste to leave them there. I'm talking about preparing the baby. Isn't our little daughter still pregnant? Damn, you know it's your daughter? What if it's a son? It's a daughter. You see, we already have 2 sons and only 1 daughter, so this must be a daughter. Su Chinsi was amused by his absurd reasoning. She said, who would guess like that? I think it must be his son. We don't want a son anymore. If we have another son, we will have 3 sons. Li Xiqing frowned. Then how are we going to raise them in the future? It was too difficult for my parents to raise the 3 of us. Chapter 16:25. Su Chinsi touched her slightly bulging belly and looked down, thinking. It was said that a daughter was a mommy's most considerate little cotton-padded jacket. She had almost no reaction when she was pregnant with this child. Could this really be his daughter? If that was true, then wouldn't the house be turned upside down by them? Li Xiqing loved his daughter so much that he was out of control. As for his son, he was basically left to fend for himself. Especially Li Jianxian, Li Xiqing even left him to fend for himself and directly threw him to the capital. Touching her belly, she whispered, I think it's a son. Li Xiqing looked at her. Sons and daughters are the same. What are you humming for? You just want a daughter. Don't think I don't know. She pointed at his nose. Do you know what Daisa likes to eat? Stewed eggs. Su Chinsi was surprised. So you knew? Do you know what Daisa dislikes the most? Li Xiqing said with disdain, you underestimate me. He is my son after all. What is it? Tell me. Coriander. She snorted and turned her head. I thought you didn't know. How is that possible? Li Xiqing said helplessly. I even know what Mosen likes and dislikes, not to mention that he's my biological son. Su Chinsi looked at Li Xiqing and said, speaking of Mosen, I dreamed of Tang Jinghao last night. Li Xiqing gazed at her. Su Chinsi was still in shock and said, I dreamed that he was killed by Bo Xiao in the fire. There was such a big hole in his head and even his brain was spurting out. And Tang Menjing's mother? Why are you dreaming of these people? Li Xiqing frowned in dissatisfaction and said, You should quickly forget about these things. It's useless to remember these people. Of course I know, but a dream is a dream. What can I do? Su Chenxi thought for a moment and said, I wonder how Tang Mingqing is doing. Rich in Vietnam, Li Xiqing said. I have people watching her. Don't worry, she can't do anything. Vietnam? Yeah, Li Xiqing said. Let's go home. He took out his car keys and opened the door. Su Chenxi quickly followed up and asked, Does she know that you have someone watching her? I don't know. It would be terrible if I knew. He opened the car door for her and fastened the seat belt for her. My people have become her neighbors. Oh, that works too. Okay. He drove the car slowly and was soon on the road home. Hey, I also dreamed about something else last night. Huh? When Mosen grew up, he looked exactly like Tang Mingqing. He knew that the tragedy of the Tang family was indirectly caused by us. He hated me very much. Mrs. Li, he interrupted her. I need to remind you of a few things. She blinked and did not say anything. First, the Tang family's fate was not a tragedy. It was a matter of course. Holding the steering wheel firmly, Li Xiqing glanced at her and said, There's a saying that goes, if you don't ask for it, you won't die. They deserved it. Have you forgotten what they did to you? But. Chapter 1626. How could she forget? At that time, in the abandoned warehouse in the eastern suburbs, Tang Jinghao had sent someone to hold a steel pipe as thick as 2 fingers to her belly. At that time, her belly was already 7 or 8 months old. She was pregnant with twins, so her belly was much bigger than the average person's. If that had happened, it wouldn't have just been 2 children. It would have been adults. Although she and the children were not harmed, she had lost her man for more than 4 years. Although it was already over, the despair was still very clear. Thinking of the past, Su Chenxi shivered and was still in shock. Looking at Li Xiqing, a living man was right in front of her, driving the car steadily. Su Chenxi calmed down and said, I won't forget. Seeing this, Li Xiqing knew that she had already thought it through and said, Do you remember that I once told you that the Tang family has the blood of ingrates flowing in their bones? Of course she remembered. Don't be afraid that Mosen will hate us. Now that things have come to this, we can only resign ourselves to fate. Li Xiqing sighed. If it really is like what you dreamed, then I will accept it. Who asked me to have a stupid kind wife? Su Chenxi didn't dare to speak. She opened her eyes and stared at Li Xiqing. When she adopted Li Mosen, she only felt that the child was very pitiful. She didn't think too much about it. In fact, after adopting Li Mosen, Su Chenxi hadn't even thought about this possibility. Who would have thought that such an unintentional dream would actually lead to such a worrying hidden danger? Li Xiqing glanced at her and said, Don't think too much about it. I was just saying it casually. Mosen was raised by us. We will slowly train him in the future. Now he is a child of the Li family. Su Chenxi's heart slowly relaxed. She muttered to herself, No matter how strong the bloodline is, it can't overcome the influence of the environment. As she spoke, she looked forward and murmured, He is only 5 years old now. What happens in the future will depend on his upbringing. Smart. Li Xiqing's eyes curved. You are indeed my wife. You have always been smart. This is called being influenced by one's company. Shameless. The court opened and Shen Luo and sat in the courtroom as the defendant. Yi Yuyu and Li Jinan, on the other hand, sat among the audience and looked ahead. Both Shen Luo and Nguyen Yanhong looked to be in bad shape. Both of them had lost a lot of weight, with unshaven beards and dark circles under their eyes. For Guan Yanhong, it was because of his daughter. For Shen Luo, it was because of the sudden imprisonment. The plaintiff I Guan has accused me of murdering his daughter. I Shen have confessed. On account of my good repentance, I shall be sentenced to 20 years in prison. A heavy hammer slammed down, announcing that everything was settled. The weight in Yi Yuyu's heart was lifted. The Shen family's parents were excited, and Mrs. Shen burst into tears. That's great, we don't have to die, we still have a chance to come out. Shenjilia had only arrived in the capital yesterday afternoon. He reached out to pat his mother on the back and looked at Shen Luo and with a frown. Shen Longyue, on the other hand, had a gloomy expression on his face. No one knew what he was thinking. Guan Yanhong stood up in court and bellowed, How is that possible? I refuse to accept this. I want to appeal. Scum. You're all scum. Did my daughter die in vain? Chapter 1627. The judge was very displeased and yelled, Silence. Guan Yanhong acted as if he hadn't heard him and said, There must be a trap. I'm not convinced. I want to appeal. This is the Supreme People's Court. Security, escort him away. Guan Yanhong was escorted away by two burly men, but he didn't stop. As he struggled, he yelled and screamed. His voice was very loud. The judge dismissed the court and Shen Luo, and was quickly escorted away. As he was being escorted away, his eyes were fixed on Yi Yuyu, who was sitting in the audience. Yi Yuyu felt as if her heart was throbbing in pain. Li Jinnan gently placed his hand on her shoulder and said, "Don't worry. I'll get him out." Yi Yuyu's eyes reddened as she hugged Li Jinnan. Li Jinnan gently caressed her shoulder. His eyes darkened as he remained silent. When Shen Longyue and the rest of the Shen family witnessed the scene, they were not very happy. When Yi Yuyu had been with the Shen family, Shen Longyue hadn't been very fond of her. He had felt that the girl was very vicious. She had harmed Guan Kui so badly at such a young age. After spending some time with her, he realized that the girl wasn't very brave. She was also very kind. How could such a child push her own sister off the cliff? Because old Mrs. Shen didn't like her, Shen Longyue couldn't be bothered to talk to her. On the other hand, Mrs. Shen was quite close to Yi Yuyu. Shen Jilia's relationship with Yi Yuyu wasn't bad either. Mrs. Shen wiped away her tears as she looked at Yi Yuyu and Li Jinnan. He walked over to Yi Yuyu's side and called out, "Yuyu?" Yi Yuyu and Li Jinnan were in each other's embrace. She didn't notice them approaching. When she heard Mrs. Shen's voice, her body stiffened as she turned her head to look. Mrs. Shen's eyes were about to turn into little light bulbs from crying. They were slightly swollen and her eyes were red. She looked exhausted. It was obvious that the past few days had been a torment for her. Yi Yuyu turned around and greeted, "Uncle, Auntie Jilia?" Everything had reverted to how it had been before Yi Yuyu had married Shen Luo. Shen Longyue felt a little sad. His emotions were complicated. Mrs. Shen felt even sadder. She sobbed and said, "Thank you. Auntie, what are you thanking me for?" Yi Yuyu's gaze was calm as she replied, "If you're thanking me for helping Shen Luo, and there's no need to thank me. It's what I should do. If it wasn't for him, I would be the one being wrongfully imprisoned." Yi Yuyu was telling the truth. When Mrs. Shen heard that, she sighed heavily. After all, Yi Yuyu used to be part of their family. Even though they were divorced, it was still difficult for him to forget her. That was why he had chosen to stand up for her at this critical juncture. She continued, "If you're thanking me for divorcing Shen Luo, and you don't have to thank me." Looking at the complicated expression on Mrs. Shen's face, Yi Yuyu felt a sense of satisfaction. After a pause, she slowly said, "If he hadn't divorced me in order to be with Guan Kui, I wouldn't be with the man I truly love right now." When Mrs. Shen heard this, her heart ached. Yuyu. Chapter 1628. If it hadn't been for old Mrs. Shen's cold treatment, Yi Yuyu probably wouldn't have been so resolute in their divorce. They wouldn't be where they were now. All of this was thanks to old Mrs. Shen. But the way she addressed her as auntie broke Mrs. Shen's heart. When he looked down and saw Yi Yuyu rubbing her abdomen, he understood what was going on. After a long time, he nodded and said, "You've worked hard during that period." That period of time? Tears welled up in Yi Yuyu's eyes. She forced a smile and said, "It wasn't hard at all. We're leaving now. Goodbye." Goodbye. Yi Yuyu pulled Li Jinnan and turned around. Her heart ached. Li Jinnan stayed by her side the entire time without saying a word. When they walked out of the courthouse, Li Jinnan pulled her gently and asked, "Are you all right?" She hugged him and gently said, "I'm fine. I'm just a little sad." "What are you sad about?" Li Jinnan's voice was soft and slightly hoarse. "What are you upset about?" Yi Yuyu didn't know what she was upset about. After a long while, he said softly, "Things remain the same, but people have changed. It's just a little sad. Let's go back." "Yes." Just as the two of them reached the parking lot, they saw Li Jinnan's black car from afar. It was covered in a layer of colorful paint. The smell of paint was very strong. Yi Yuyu was stunned and looked at Li Jinnan. Li Jinnan's brows were tightly knitted together. It was obvious that he hadn't expected such a thing to happen. As if to test the waters, Li Jinnan pressed the key and sure enough the car lights immediately lit up. Their car had been splashed with paint. Regardless of whether it was Yi Yuyu or Li Jinnan, this was the first time they had encountered such a situation. Just as the two of them were standing there, a person walked out from the back of the car. It was Yi Tian. Yi Tian was dressed in a beautiful, luxurious and high-heeled dress. She exuded elegance and elegance. She walked over with a handbag in her hand. When she saw Li Jinnan, her eyes were filled with resentment. "I finally meet you, my precious daughter?" Judging by Yi Tian's expression, It was obvious that she was up to no good. Yi Yu looked at Yi Tian in this state. The gentle image of Yi Tian in the past was gradually becoming more and more distant from her name. The mother-daughter bond that she'd thought she'd had with Guan Kui had vanished into thin air after the slap she'd given her at her wedding. "Did you do this?" Li Jinan's eyes were cold and his face was expressionless. When Yi Tian heard Li Jinan's words, she laughed dryly and replied, "So what if I did it? You rascal, you're refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. You tricked my daughter away. It's only right that I destroy your car." Such a hooligan comment made Li Jinan so angry that he laughed. He picked up his cell phone and dialed 110. When Yi Tian saw that he was calling for help, her expression changed. "You little rascal, what are you trying to do? Little brat, who are you calling?" Li Jinan replied lazily and didn't bother to explain. The call was quickly connected. Li Jinan said, "Hello, police comrade. I am now at the entrance of the First People's Court." Yi Tian's expression changed drastically as she said, "You little B*****. You've eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts. How dare you call the police after lying to my daughter?" As she spoke, she rushed forward and reached out her hand to snatch the phone. Before she could even touch Li Jinan's hand, Li Jinan dodged her. Chapter 1629. All of a sudden Yi Tian's pretense of elegance vanished into thin air. With a look of hatred on her face she yelled, "Yi Yu, what are you doing? Can't you see this B***** bullying your mother? Is this how you treat your mother?" Yi Yu looked at her coldly when she heard that. When Yi Yu saw that Yi Yu didn't speak, she grew even more frustrated. She yelled, "Yi Yu." When Yi Yu heard her yell, she walked over to Li Jinan's side. Li Jinan had already made the police report. After explaining the situation in a concise manner, he stood by the side of the car. Yi Tian's clothes were disheveled, and her hair was disheveled. When she saw the state she was in, she felt that she had lost her chance. That was an unbearable feeling for anyone, much less Yi Tian. All these years she had pursued and wanted, and she had gotten everything she wanted. In the end, everything had been ruined by Yi Yu. Yi Tian walked briskly in Yi Yu's direction. She reached out to grab Yi Yu's hand and said, "Come with me. Hurry." Yi Yu dodged to the side and coldly asked, "What are you doing?" "What am I doing?" Yi Tian laughed mirthlessly. "I'm bringing my daughter home." When Yi Yu heard that, it was as if she had heard a joke. She shifted to the side and asked, "Am I your daughter? If you're not my daughter, then whose daughter are you?" "I thought that only Guan Kui was your daughter," Yi Yu said sarcastically. She scoffed. "All these years you've never treated me as your daughter. Why are you putting on an act now?" Yi Yu mocked her sarcastically. She scoffed. When Yi Tian heard that, she looked shocked. Her slightly disheveled hair complemented Yi Tian's expression, making her look even more pathetic and downtrodden. Yi Tian was heartbroken. She looked at Yi Yu with a hint of sadness in her eyes and said, "How could you think that way? All these years, if I hadn't treated you as my daughter, I would have chased you away a long time ago. In fact, you've already chased me away." Yi Yu's heart ached as the memories of the past came flooding back. When Guan Kui had gotten into trouble, Yi Tian had cried her heart out on Guan Kui's bed and called her precious daughter. At that time, everyone gave her the cold shoulder. Other than the initial blame, Yi Yu spent the rest of the time blaming herself. When she couldn't stand the self-blame anymore, she left the Guan family. She thought that Yi Tian would try to persuade her to stay. However, the truth made her heart turn cold. Not only did Yi Tian not try to persuade him to stay, she even said in agreement, "That's a good idea. You move out first and we'll talk about the rest later." One sentence in the future and there would be no future. Yi Yu didn't want to return to the Guan family. However, Yi Yu still wanted to acknowledge her as her mother. Who would have guessed that when she was seriously injured while filming, Yi Tian had only visited her twice in the hospital for over a month. She had been hospitalized for over a month. Moreover, they would only stay for less than half a day before leaving in a hurry. Compared to the incident with Guan Kui all those years ago, Yi Tian was far too cold toward him. This time, when Guan Kui died, Yi Tian had slapped her in front of everyone. Yi Yu had already seen through everything. Perhaps, in Yi Tian's heart, she never saw herself as a part of her new family. Chapter 1630. Yi Yu laughed self-deprecatingly. She looked at Yi Tian with ridicule in her eyes. When Yi Tian heard Yi Yu's words, it was as if she had been greatly hurt. She replied, "How could that be? You were the one who wanted to leave. I couldn't even stop you." Yi Yu's lips curled into a mocking smile as she replied, Is that so? I'm really sorry to have caused you so much trouble. Yi Tian looked relieved. She stepped forward and extended her hand to Yi Yuyu. Don't throw a tantrum at mommy anymore. Come home with mommy. I don't have a daughter anymore. I don't want to lose you as well. Yu mommy's good daughter. Come home with me, okay? When Yi Yuyu heard that, it was as if a thin layer of ice had slowly melted away from her frozen heart. However, at the same time, a scorching hot brand was ruthlessly stabbed into it. It was painful and thick smoke billowed out. Are you referring to Guan Kui when you say you don't have a daughter? Yi Yuyu asked softly. Her tone was extremely sarcastic. Yi Tian couldn't figure out what Yi Yuyu was getting at. After a moment she said, Yu mommy knows that you hate me, but blood is thicker than water. Your father has already divorced me and he's filing for divorce. This is all your fault. If it weren't for you, Kui wouldn't have done something so foolish. Yi Tian's words made Li Jinan's eyes narrow. Yi Yuyu didn't react in time. She only paid attention to the first half of her sentence. With a cold laugh she asked, Are you referring to Guan Yanhong? Yi Tian was stunned for a moment before replying, Yes, I only have one father. His name is Yi Zhenhua. Guan Yanhong is merely your husband and my stepfather. Yi Yuyu looked at Yi Tian with sympathy in her eyes. Is my stepfather finally seeing your true colors and divorcing you? That's a cause for celebration. Her tone was exactly the same as when Yi Qianshan had mocked her a few days ago. Yi Tian widened her eyes and looked at Yi Yuyu in disbelief. When Yi Yuyu saw the expression on her face, her lips curled up in a smile as she said, Filing for divorce. Does that mean you're leaving the family with nothing? That's right, Li Jinan replied. He looked at Yi Tian sympathetically and said, Come to think of it, your mother was quite pitiful. Yi Yuyu hadn't expected him to suddenly speak. She turned to look at him with surprise in her eyes. She's already so old. She's at the end of her life, yet she got divorced. She won't have any children to send her off in the future. How tragic. Li Jinan clicked his tongue and shook his head. His eyes were filled with pity. When Yi Yuyu heard that, she didn't feel good either. Yi Tian was indeed no longer young. Marrying the wrong man had ruined her life. When Yi Tian heard his words, she flew into a rage. You jerk! Before she could finish her sentence, Li Jinan interrupted her. Li Jinan's dark eyes shone like the stars as he gazed at Yi Tian. Enunciating each word, he said, I sympathize with you. Because of Guan Kui, your life has been ruined. If it weren't for Guan Kui, your daughter wouldn't have refused to acknowledge you, he said. Yi Qianshan was destined to have nothing to do with you from the moment you divorced your ex-husband. Right now, even Yi Yuyu, who is somewhat related to you by blood and could possibly take care of you in your old age, doesn't want to acknowledge you. This is all Guan Kui's fault, isn't it? Chapter 1631. Li Jinan looked at Yi Tian and took a step forward. In a slow voice he said, If Guan Kui hadn't done what she did, why would Guan Yanhong divorce you? Yi Tian's resentment toward Guan Kui grew by the second. Yi Yuyu couldn't figure out what Li Jinan was up to. She couldn't help but look at him in confusion. At that moment, Li Jinan's dark and sharp eyes were fixed on Yi Tian. He didn't even blink. It was as if he was trying to read something from Yi Tian's expression. He watched as the hatred on Yi Tian's face deepened. Guan Kui did such a thing at her own wedding and even framed your biological daughter. Now her father wants to divorce you. Aren't you angry? Yi Qianshan asked. Li Jinan's words were gentle and persuasive. When Yi Yuyu heard that, she could vaguely guess what Li Jinan was trying to do. At that moment, Yi Tian had completely lost the ability to distinguish between the two. Especially when she thought about how hard she had worked for the Guan family all these years. When Guan Yanhong was tired, she would give him a massage. When Guan Kui was hospitalized, she would run all over the place to serve her. When she was married to Yi Zhenhua, she would never have had the chance to do something like that. Back then, Yi Zhenhua worked during the day and would come home to accompany her at night. When she was tired, he would massage her muscles. When she was sad, he would do his best to cheer her up. That kind of treatment was completely reversed when it came to Guan Yanhong. However, that kind of sacrifice continued for more than a decade. She had spent the best of her time with Guan Yanhong and Guan Kui. Of all the times Guan Kui had died, Guan Yanhong wanted to divorce her. Furthermore, he had resorted to all means to force her out of the family. Yi Tian hadn't expected such a turn of events. She couldn't accept it. When she heard Li Jinan's words, the hatred in Yi Tian's heart grew. Unfortunately, even if you hate them, they won't sympathize with you. There was no warmth in Li Jinan's words. It was as if he was narrating an insignificant matter. Because of Guan Kui's stubbornness and Guan Yanhong's heartlessness, you'll lose your daughter for the rest of your life. No one will take care of you in your old age. When you're old, you'll have to stay in a rented house alone. Even if you die in there, no one will know. That's your fate. Li Jinan's words were like icicles that pierced right into the heart of Yi Tian's worries. Behind the broken window was the bloody, cruel truth that Yi Tian refused to accept. How is that possible? That day will never come. Yi Tian roared angrily. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to trick me? It's not that easy. When Li Jinan heard that, he coldly mocked her and said, I'm just telling you what your future will be like. However, even if I don't say it out loud, you'll be able to figure it out for yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here today and trying to get Yi Yuyu to leave with you, would you? Yi Tian's expression darkened when she heard that. Li Jinan's eyes were filled with mockery. He looked at her calmly and said, It's time for you to make plans for the future, Madame Yi. Yi Tian's expression changed. She asked helplessly, What can I do? Chapter 1632. Li Jinan's red lips were tightly pursed. His brows were slightly furrowed. His expression couldn't be more serious. Yi Yuyu, who was listening from the side, trembled in fear. She looked at Li Jinan in a different light. She had never imagined that Li Jinan would have such a sharp side to him. Yi Tian was moved by Li Jinan's words. She gritted her teeth and said, He's also a B*****starred. He clearly knew that Guan Kui committed suicide, but he insisted that it was Yi Yuyu's fault and almost landed her in jail. That old B*****starred is just like that little B*****starred. Both of them are degenerates. Yi Yuyu's heart skipped a beat when she heard Yi Tian's words. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Guan Kui committed suicide? In other words, everything that Guan Yanhong had done was all a facade. They knew the truth a long time ago, but they just didn't want to say it. Yi Yuyu's heart, which was already cold, suddenly felt as if a blizzard had struck it. She had thought that her heart couldn't be any colder. When she heard that Yi Tian had helped them hide such an important matter, she couldn't help but feel sad. Looking at Yi Tian, who was standing in front of her, Yi Yuyu wanted to laugh, but she couldn't. Who was the one who called the police just now? A booming voice rang out. Yi Tian and Yi Yuyu were both startled. They turned their heads to look at the source of the voice. Four police officers walked over and saw the car that had been splashed with colorful paint. It was me, Li Jinan replied. What's going on? Li Jinan briefly explained the situation. Yi Tian was a little shocked. She instinctively took a step back, but she was quickly restrained by the police. Come with us. Sir, you should come with us too. Li Jinan nodded his head slightly and replied, Indeed, I should make the trip. There's something else that I need your help with as well. Let's talk about it at the police station, the officer said. Leave this to us. We'll get someone to test the model of the car and how long it's been bought. We'll then ask for compensation from this lady. One of the police officers looked at the car and shook his head. This car doesn't look cheap. It must cost at least $1 million. When she heard the price, Yi Tian's face turned pale. At the moment, Yi Tian and Guan Yanhong were in the midst of divorce proceedings. If everything went according to plan, Yi Tian would not get a single penny after the divorce. There was no alimony and there was nothing more. How was he going to take out more than $1 million? When Li Jinan saw the expression on Yi Tian's face, he already had a plan in mind. He said, Madame Yi, perhaps we can discuss this privately. The policemen looked at each other. They could not figure out what this young man wanted to do. It's such an expensive car. Even if she wants to settle it privately, she can't afford to pay for it. However, judging by Yi Tian's attire, she didn't look like she couldn't afford it. Why did his expression change so much? When Yi Tian heard Li Jinan's words, it was as if she had grabbed hold of a life-saving straw. She immediately replied, Let's settle it out of court. Private? You're my son-in-law after all. You can't really make me pay so much money, right? Yi Yuyu found those words laughable. She retorted, Why didn't you think of the consequences when you ordered them to splash paint? Besides, who's your son-in-law? Our relationship is no longer that of mother and daughter, Madame Yi Tian. Chapter 1633. She had only splashed the paint on the car for a moment of pleasure. She had originally thought that the car belonged to Yi Yuyu's man anyway. No matter what, he would give Yi Yuyu face and not be calculative with her. After all, the Li family wasn't lacking in money. She had been wrong. She had been terribly wrong. Yi Tian had never expected that Li Jinan would actually call the police without any hesitation. He didn't show any mercy at all. She clenched her jaw and glared at Yi Yuyu. In a fit of rage she said, "I'm your mother." Yi Yu shook her head and replied, "You don't deserve it." Those 3 words were spoken casually, but they completely dissipated Yi Tian's anger. These 3 words suddenly intertwined into a force that fiercely smashed into the bottom of her heart. It hurt. Compared to the taunts Yi Qianshan had uttered a few days ago, those words made her feel even sadder. "Yu Yu?" Yi Tian looked at Yi Yu with a pained expression. The series of changes that had occurred in such a short period of time had made Li Jinan feel disgusted and pathetic. In all his 30 years of living, he had never seen such a despicable person. He couldn't be bothered to continue watching her act and said, "Settle it out of court. Otherwise we'll both go to the police station. If we can't afford it, we'll go to jail. Pick one." Yi Tian panicked when she heard that. "How can I go to jail? I'm your mother-in-law." "That's not what you said just now." Li Jinan's tone was mocking, but it was barely noticeable. Yi Tian was at a loss for words. She quickly said, "Settle it out of court. What do you want?" "If that's the case, I'll have to trouble you to go back." "I'm sorry." The officers who had been dispatched were all veteran officers who had been on the job for many years, but they had never encountered such a bizarre incident. Anyone who saw a car worth millions defiled in such a manner would have to go to the police station for a visit. This was the first time that the owner of the car had suggested settling it out of court. After all, it was someone else's business and it wasn't appropriate to comment on it. After a few words of complaint, the police officers left. Li Jinan looked at Yi Tian and she looked back at him. Her eyes were filled with apprehension and anticipation as she asked, "What do you mean settle it out of court? Guan Kui committed suicide?" Yi Tian paused and asked, "You want me to testify for you? But hasn't Yu Yu already come out?" "You don't need to know what I want. I just want to know the truth." Yi Tian was silent for a moment before replying, "I can tell you, but I have another condition." When Li Jinan heard that, he laughed. "Do you think you have the right to negotiate terms with me now?" Yi Tian's expression changed, but she still braced herself and said, "Of course I do. No matter what you think of me, I'm still Yu Yu's biological mother. Since that's the case, if you want to marry my daughter, it's not too much to give me a betrothal gift, right?" Yu Yu was also angry and roared, "How can you be so shameless?" Yi Tian didn't seem to notice that she had been scolded. She ignored Yi Yu and continued to stare at Li Jinan. When Li Jinan heard that, he smiled and replied, "Of course. However, we have to take care of things one at a time. Why don't we find a place to sit down and talk things over?" "No, if you want to marry my daughter, you must have 1,000,000, not one less. Otherwise, there's nothing to talk about today." When Yi Tian said this, she sounded as though she was in the right. Chapter 1634. She roared, "Have you ever treated me as your daughter all these years? Now that you're asking for money, you're calling me your daughter? Yi Tian, you're shameless." Yi Yu was so angry that she was practically spouting smoke. Yi Tian couldn't care less if others were calling her shameless or not. Now she wanted money. Money. When Yi Yu saw that Yi Tian wasn't speaking, she reached out and tugged on Li Jinan's hand. "Don't agree to her request. The repair fees for this car alone will cost her a lot. If she doesn't pay up, let her go to jail. At the very least, food would be provided in jail. No matter what, Yi Tian wouldn't starve to death in jail. When she's released, she might turn over a new leaf. Everything else aside, she'll change her temper. When that time comes, I'll take care of her." Yi Yu had already made up her mind. She looked at Li Jinan with a frown. Unexpectedly, Li Jinan didn't even look at her. He looked at Yi Tian and said, "Fine, I agree to your request." When Yi Yu heard that, she panicked and said, "Are you stupid? You've been tricked." Li Jinan reached out and placed his hand on hers. "She's right. If I want to marry you, I have to give your parents a betrothal gift. 1,000,000 for a wife isn't a loss." When Yi Yu heard that, she felt even more indignant. She said, "You're really going to piss me off." Yi Tian, on the other hand, was elated. Her originally tense expression relaxed. Looking at Li Jinan, Yi Tian felt more and more satisfied. She said, "You're the one who said it. Prove it to me. Come, I'll record it. In case you go back on your word." As she spoke, Yi Tian took out a recording pen and walked over to Li Jinan. Yi Yu was infuriated. She reached out and slapped her hand away. Yi Tian quickly reached her hand back and urged, "Hurry up, son-in-law. After you're done recording, I'll give you something that you've always wanted." Yi Yu assumed that it was a trap and said, "No way." Yi Tian was infuriated. "Are you even my daughter? You traitorous b*****. Li Jinan reached out and pulled Yi Yuyu behind him. He took the voice recorder from Yi Tian's hand and said in a serious tone, I, Li Jinan, have agreed to pay Madame Yi Tian the betrothal gift for my marriage to her daughter, Yi Yuyu. It is a total of $1 million. After recording one sentence, he threw the recording pen back. When Yi Tian heard that, she felt that it wasn't enough. She said, that won't do. Say it again. Swear that the liar will die a horrible death and be struck by lightning. Yi Yuyu gritted her teeth in anger. Don't go overboard. Swear on it. Yi Tian handed it to him aggressively. Li Jinan's eyes lit up and he did as he was told. Yi Tian played the recording and listened to it a few times. After confirming that there were no mistakes, she put the recording pen away. Then she gave Li Jinan a small ceramic pendant. The pendant was a Kelda duck. It looked very cute and it was holding its head with a serious expression. Yi Tian gently clasped the bottom of the ceramic pendant, and a clear voice immediately played out. Dad, I just received some unfortunate news. It was Guan Kui's voice. It was obvious that Guan Kui was speaking to Guan Yanhong. All these years the one Shen Luo and loves the most is still Yi Yuyu. That's why he ran away from the wedding. Chapter 1635. I've wanted to marry him for so many years, but it wasn't just to call him my brother. What should I do, father? I realize that I'm so selfish. I actually want Shen Luo and to die. I want to kill him and then commit suicide. Do you know that this idea has been in my mind for a long time, father? Guan Kui's voice began to sound like she was about to cry. She sounded very upset. Yi Yuyu's expression was complicated. She looked at Yi Tian and listened to the recording. Her heart sank. After receiving the news, I've been trying to call him, but his phone has been switched off. Dad, I'm thinking, is it because I'm not good enough? Or is it because I'm not as good as Yi Yuyu that he chose her over me? Every word that Guan Kui said was heartbreaking. It wasn't hard to imagine Guan Yanhong's face breaking down when he heard that. I just saw Yi Yuyu. She was with a man. The man looked so outstanding. He wasn't any worse than Shen Luo Han. But why can't I ever meet a man like him? I can't accept this. Dad, since I can't kill Shen Luo, and I'll kill Yi Yuyu instead. That woman has ruined too much for me. I don't want to let her off so easily. In any case, I'm mentally ill. Mentally ill people don't have to bear any legal consequences when they commit crimes. At most, I'll just have to spend a few more days in the mental hospital. Li Jinan's face darkened as he listened. He turned his head to look at Yi Yuyu. He was still in a state of shock. He didn't dare imagine what his reaction would have been if Yi Yuyu had been the one who had died. That way Shen Luo and will be in great pain. Ah, Dad, isn't my idea great? Immediately the recording device was filled with the sound of rustling. No one spoke again. Only the sound of glass containers clinking and water being poured could be heard. As long as Yi Yuyu drinks this, she will die without a doubt. Li Jinan was filled with rage when he heard that. His originally expressionless face darkened to the extreme. Following that, the sound of thermos bottles clinking and lids being twisted could be heard. There was silence. Yi Yuyu hadn't expected to hear such content. She was shocked and confused. She asked, "That's it?" "Not yet. There's more to come," Yi Tian replied. Indeed, after a few minutes, the voice on the other end of the line said, "Dad, I've reconsidered. If I really kill Yi Yuyu, Shen Luo and will not return to my side." As Guan Kui spoke, there seemed to be a bitter smile on her face. She self-deprecatingly said, "Who would want to spend the rest of their lives with a deranged murderer?" Indeed, he was quite self-aware. "So, Dad, I've decided. I want them to remember me forever and never forget me." Guan Kui's voice paused for a moment. In a very soft voice he said, "Perhaps Luo and will forever feel guilty towards me. I want Yi Yuyu to be sentenced to death. I want Yi Yuyu to die. Ha! And no one can stop me." When Li Jinan and Yi Yuyu heard that, their hearts skipped a beat. "I love you, Dad. I hope I can be your daughter again in my next life. I've let you down in this life. Dash." Chapter 1636. At that point in the recording, the situation had become very clear. Li Jinan's expression was extremely dark. On the other hand, Yi Yuyu's expression was one of confusion. It was as if she had expected it, but at the same time, it was beyond her expectations. She instinctively looked up at Li Jinan. Even she didn't know how she was feeling at that moment. After a long time she finally said, "In that case, can we use this recording to rescue Shen Luo and?" Yi Yuyu's words caused Yi Tian's expression to tense up. She instinctively squeezed the ceramic pendant, but she immediately let go. She looked at the pendant in her hand with a look of hesitation on her face. Because of Li Jinan's words, Yi Tian had impulsively blurted out the matter and even produced the recording. Now that time had passed, Yi Tian had completely calmed down. She knew very well what the consequences would be if she really handed over this recording file. Once the item landed in the hands of Yi Yuyu and Li Jinan, she would have gotten her money. However, it would be impossible for her and Guan Yanhong to be together again. Yi Tian was a little hesitant. She stared at the ceramic pendant and tightened her grip on it. All of a sudden, a big hand reached over and snatched the recording file away. Yi Tian was caught off guard. She gripped it tightly and exclaimed, "What are you doing?" Li Jinan's eyes were cold. Without a care in the world, he snatched the object from her and said, "Madame Yi, we've already come to an agreement." As he spoke, he played the recording again. Yi Tian wanted to snatch it back, but Li Jinan quickly raised his hand high. Yi Tian was even shorter than Yi Yuyu. She couldn't reach Li Jinan's hand at all. The voice rang out clearly and played the recording again. After making sure that Yi Tian hadn't tampered with it, Li Jinan stuffed the object into Yi Yuyu's handbag. "Keep this safe. We can contact the lawyer now." Li Jinan's voice was cold and determined. He looked at Yi Tian with his bright, dark eyes and slowly said, "Thank you, Madame Yi." Yi Tian was getting more and more anxious. She looked at the Kelda duck that was being taken away and cried out, "Wait!" Li Jinan ignored her. He held Yi Yuyu's hand and calmly said, "Let's go." Yi Yuyu reacted quickly and turned around. However, when he saw the car, he still felt like he was about to collapse. The destruction was too thorough. As Yi Tian watched them walk further and further away, she felt increasingly uneasy. He stood there for a long time without moving. "You have to plan for your own future. Guan Yanhong has already lost a daughter, and the two of you are about to get a divorce. Yi Tian, you have to work hard." In the empty parking lot, Yi Tian whispered to herself, "After the divorce you'll have nothing. You won't have anyone to send you off when you're old. You have to make plans for yourself." Yi Tian muttered to herself. However, her heart felt increasingly empty. She looked ahead and saw Li Jinan embracing Yi Yuyu. The sight of the two of them snuggling together was very sweet. This was her daughter, her son-in-law. At the end of the day, Yi Yuyu was his daughter. However, what she did today, was it right or wrong? Guan Yanhong was detained for 3 days. In the end, he was bailed out by his lawyer. Chapter 1637. Since I can't kill Yi Yuyu, I'll make sure she lives the rest of her life alone. My daughter's death can't be in vain. When the lawyer heard Guan Yanhong's words, he hesitated and said, "Mr. Guan, we might not be able to handle this matter for the time being." Guan Yanhong paused for a moment. He stood where he was and looked at the lawyer. With a smile, he said, "In that case, we'll get another lawyer who can handle it." The lawyer's expression was still solemn as he said, "I'm afraid that no matter how many lawyers you get, they won't be able to help you at this point in time." As he spoke, he took out a lawyer's letter and said, "I've just received this. There's been a new development in the case of your daughter's death." "What? A new development?" Guan Yanhong thought he had heard wrongly and yelled, "Isn't this case already closed?" Shen Luo and was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but that B*TC Yi Yuyu was completely fine. As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and asked, "Could the evidence be pointing back to that B*TCH again?" The lawyer shook his head and handed the letter over to Guan Yanhong. An ominous feeling rose in Guan Yanhong's heart. When he saw it, his heart skipped a beat. Yi Yuyu and Mr. Li Jinan, who were involved in this case, have once again presented evidence to prove that your daughter committed suicide on her own and that it had nothing to do with anyone else. Guan Yanhong found it ridiculous and flew into a rage. He tore the paper in his hand into shreds and yelled, "To hell with the evidence. She's already dead. The living were the ones who were locked up for 20 years. Now you're asking for those 20 years to be waived? Dream on." Guan Yanhong couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. At that moment, Guan Yanhong was dressed in a suit and leather shoes. On his wrist was a Vacheron Constantin business watch. His hands were on his hips and he was seething with anger. The lawyer lowered his head in silence. He retrieved the documents and said, "You might have to make a few more trips. This time Yi Yuyu and Mr. Li Jinan are very firm in their stance. Furthermore, they've already spoken to the Shen family. They're requesting for a new investigation and a new trial. Is there any way I can avoid appearing in court? I'm afraid that's not possible. You're the client and it's said." The lawyer deliberated over his words before he said slowly, "It said that this evidence was found in your room." Guan Yanhong was shocked. He turned to look at the lawyer in disbelief and asked, "What did you say?" The lawyer had already anticipated Guan Yanhong's reaction. "Your wife is a direct participant in this matter," he said. Guan Yanhong felt a sharp pain in his chest when he heard that. The pain was so intense that Guan Yanhong didn't have time to react. His entire body slumped backward. The lawyer was shocked and quickly went forward to support him. Guan Yanhong collapsed on top of the lawyer, gasping for air. "Guards, help me call an ambulance." Guan Yanhong's sudden admission to the hospital was unexpected. However, the court summons should be issued as scheduled. The trial date was set to be 3 days later. During these 3 days, Shen Luo had been transferred from the prison and relocked in the detention center. Although they were both locked up, the meaning behind it was very different. Chapter 1638. At least the heavens had eyes and didn't let him be wronged in vain. Even though it was dark ahead, he could still see the light after enduring the darkness. He just didn't know how that person was doing now. Shen Luo looked at the dark surroundings and suddenly felt a little sad. But at the same time he also felt relieved. Fortunately, Shen Manting had left. Otherwise she would feel even more disgusted if she saw Shen Luo like this. In a small village in Jiangnan the weather was clear. Under the blue sky, the thick white clouds blocked the blazing sun. The wind swept over and it was very pleasant. Shen Manting walked on the road, her stomach slightly bulging. She was carrying the simple ingredients she had just bought and was heading home. However, just as he walked to the entrance, he saw several brand new and luxurious black cars parked around the entrance. In the middle of the car there were several men in black standing there. These people were all very tall, and it could be seen that these people were undoubtedly bodyguards. Shen Manting felt a little strange, but she didn't know anyone in this small village, and no one would think that she was hiding in a place like this. So, these big spenders were definitely not looking for her. Shen Manting carried the groceries and slowly walked home with her head down, trying to minimize her presence. But the place they were blocking was very awkward. It happened to be the door of the small house she was renting. She felt for the key and walked forward, but before she could put it in, she heard the sound of the door opening behind her. Shen Manting felt the stares from all around her and felt a little scared. She immediately opened the door faster. Suddenly, an old lady's voice came from behind her. "Manting, so you're really here." The old lady's voice was very familiar. It was so familiar that Shen Manting would never forget it in this lifetime. Shen Manting paused slightly and froze on the spot. Old Mrs. Shen stepped forward and said, "Child." The old lady's petite and hunched body was right beside her. Shen Manting couldn't ignore her. She turned her head and smiled awkwardly. "Grandma," she called out. When old Mrs. Shen heard this, she immediately rebuked her and said loudly, "You still remember that I'm your grandma? Why did you suddenly leave?" There was no news at all. Shen Manting was very embarrassed. She looked at the bodyguards around her. Just now, because he felt that he had to keep a low profile, he didn't dare to look at them. Now that he looked at them, he realized that he knew most of them. This was awkward. For a moment, Shen Manting felt like a fool. If he had known earlier, he would have just turned around and left. Even though his stomach had long been starving, Shen Manting rubbed her belly and forced a smile on her face. "Grandma, how did you know I was here?" "I don't know." When old Mrs. Shen saw her hand, she immediately noticed her slightly swollen belly. She said, "I only roughly calculated that you would be in this village. It was Luo and's men who helped me find out." Forget it. Shen Manting had always thought that old Mrs. Shen was quite mysterious. When she saw her just now, she wasn't too surprised. As if this was how it should be. For a moment, Shen Manting was speechless. Chapter 1639. Shen Manting finally reacted and immediately said, "I'm sorry, Grandma. I forgot. Come in, come in." Shen Manting opened the door and ushered old Mrs. Shen in. She said, "Our house is small. I lived alone, so I found a place to stay." "You?" Shen Manting turned around and found that other than the stool in front of the desk, the only other place to sit was on the bed. "Please sit here," Shen Manting said as she pulled the stool out. Old Mrs. Shen looked at Shen Manting's residence and furrowed her brows. It was a small single room, less than 10 square meters in size, with a bed that was about 1 meter in length. Opposite the bed was a small table, followed by a plastic stool. The walls were made of cement and were a little rough. There wasn't even a single tile on it. There was a small kitchen and toilet. Fortunately, the windows were large and it looked like it was well lit. However, the strong and bright light made the shabbiness of the house, which was incompatible with them, even more obvious. It was clear at a glance. Old Mrs. Shen had never seen such a small house. Could such a house really be livable? However, old Mrs. Shen didn't say this out loud. Following his words, he sat on the only small stool. Shin Manting looked at it and said, "It might be a little hard. Do you want me to get you a pillow?" "There's no need, Manting." Old Mrs. Shen smiled kindly and turned to look at the bodyguard who followed her in. She said, "I'm talking to my granddaughter-in-law. Get out." The sudden address made Shin Manting's heart skip a beat. Granddaughter-in-law? What did she mean? The bodyguard nodded and quickly left, closing the door behind him. Shin Manting's stomach growled again. It was especially obvious in the quiet small room. Old Mrs. Shin chuckled when she heard it and said, "You must be hungry. Come, Grandma will make you something to eat. What did you buy?" Shin Manting hurriedly waved her hand and said, No, it's okay. Please sit here. I'm really hungry. Why don't you sit here and I'll make something for you to eat? Is that okay?" Old Mrs. Shin nodded. "Okay, thank you. I was going to make it anyway. Then can I visit?" Old Mrs. Shin asked. Shin Manting was a little embarrassed when she heard that. She lowered her head and said, "There's nothing to see. You'd better sit here for a while. I'll be done soon." After that, he turned around and left. Shin Manting boiled it in water and began to process the fresh ingredients she had just bought. Old Mrs. Shen looked at her slender figure from behind. Her emotions were complicated. His heart ached, but he was also a little unhappy. "Do you know who Luo and is marrying?" Old Mrs. Shen suddenly asked. Shin Manting paused in the act of washing the vegetables. She quickly smiled and said, "Guan Kuei, right? I knew about it a long time ago." "Do you know what Luo and has been up to recently?" Shin Manting lowered her head and washed the vegetables. Her smile faded. Turning his head, he forced a smile and said, "After the wedding, of course, they took their beloved bride on a honeymoon. Did they go to the Maldives or Hawaii? Or did he go to some other good place?" As she spoke, Shin Manting suddenly felt a little embarrassed. Her eyes were slightly hot. She turned around and said, "Help me give him my blessings." When old Mrs. Shen heard that, she knew she had no idea at all. She sighed and said, "Guan Kuei is dead." Chapter 1640. Shin Manting immediately straightened her back and turned her head to look. Guan Kuei was dead? How could a girl like that, even if she had some mental problems over the years, just disappear like that under Shin Luo An's care? Seeing old Mrs. Shen's slightly sad expression, Shin Manting was surprised and laughed in disbelief. "Grandma, are you joking?" "Manting, you should know that I'm not the kind of person who jokes." Old Mrs. Shen looked at Shin Manting and said, "That girl died on the day of her wedding with Shin Luo An. She was poisoned to death." "By who?" Shin Manting vaguely felt that the illness was not as simple as it seemed. She asked, "Why would she suddenly disappear?" "I don't know. The current verdict is that Shin Luo An committed the crime." Old Mrs. Shen sighed softly and said, "But I know that Shin Luo An is not that kind of person." Shin Manting laughed softly when she heard that. She seemed to be muttering to herself, "Who knows what kind of person he is in secret?" "Manting," old Mrs. Shen's tone was somewhat meaningful as she said, "I know that Shin Luo An has let you down, but he is now in prison and sentenced to 20 years? Shin Manting was washing the vegetables. When she heard that, her heart suddenly felt as if it had been stabbed. It caught her off guard and it made her feel refreshed. 20 years. Shin Manting softly repeated those 3 words. She didn't know what to feel. She should have been happy, but at that moment Shin Manting felt an indescribable mix of emotions. So Shin Luo An would also have such a day? Yes, 20 years. Old Mrs. Shen stood up and said, "In 20 years your child will have grown up. Even if something happens to Shin Luo An in these 20 years, he won't be without an heir." Shin Manting was even more stunned. She stood rooted to the ground in disbelief. How did she know? Old Mrs. Shen walked forward and saw her hands in the water. She said, "When he comes out, if the child can call him daddy, I think Shin Luo An will be happy." Shin Manting was a little embarrassed at being cut off. She laughed awkwardly and said, "What are you talking about? What child?" Old Mrs. Shen had expected her to deny it, so she ignored her and said, "The child needs a better environment to grow up in. Come home with me, Manting." "Grandma, I don't know where you heard that, but we don't have a child. It was a mistake between me and Shin Luo An." Shin Manting scooped up the washed vegetables and said, "Such a ridiculous thing can't continue. It's better this way. Now that Shin Luo and is in prison, I can go back to my own life, Grandma." "Manting, thank you for taking care of me all this while." Shin Manting interrupted the old man and said, "Can you just pretend that you've never met me? Just pretend that we didn't know each other. You didn't bring me back to the Shin family, so I didn't know Shin Luo-han." "Manting, Grandma, I can't go back. Shin Luo and doesn't treat me as a human being at all." Shin Manting's voice was choked with sobs. Chapter 1641. "That's because he forced me," Shin Manting growled. "Everyone thinks he's a gentleman. He's filial, smart and capable. He doesn't seem to have any problems at all." Shin Manting turned around and looked at old Mrs. Shen. She shouted, "But do you know who he is secretly?" Before old Mrs. Shen could finish, Shin Manting interrupted her. "You don't know. You don't know anything. He's a beast, a devil. He doesn't even treat me as a human being." "There must be some misunderstanding." "Ha! Misunderstanding?" Shin Manting laughed. "There's no misunderstanding, Grandma. You should go back. I won't go with you. I'm begging you, okay?" Old Mrs. Shin stepped forward and grabbed Shin Manting's hand. She said, "Go back. At least don't let the child become an illegitimate child. The child is innocent." "You've misunderstood. I don't have a child." Shin Manting waved her hand away. "I don't know who you heard it from, but it's impossible for me to give birth to Shin Luo, Anne's child. That bastard is dirty." Old Mrs. Shin didn't expect Shin Manting to be so ruthless. His expression changed and he whispered, "Are you really not going to give face to Grandma? My legs are not good and my body is getting worse day by day. I've been taking medicine all this time. You know Old Mrs. Shin's face suddenly turned purple. She clutched her chest and slowly squatted down. Shin Manting was shocked. She quickly held her and said, "Grandma." Old Mrs. Shin's expression was already very ugly. At that moment she held Shin Manting's hands tightly and gasped violently. Shin Manting's expression also changed dramatically. She shouted, "Help! Help!" The bodyguard who was guarding outside rushed in. After seeing old Mrs. Shin's appearance, he immediately became vigilant. He came forward and picked up the thin little old lady. He said, "Let me." However, old Mrs. Shin held Shin Manting's hands tightly. She said in a broken voice, "You, Manting." When the bodyguard saw this, he frowned and said, "Miss, please come with us. The old lady's condition is not very optimistic, but we can't leave with you like this." Shin Manting panicked when she heard that. She reached out and tried to pull her hand away, but the little old lady's grip was very strong. "Manting." It was as if old Mrs. Shen had made up her mind to drag her away. She did not loosen her grip at all. "Miss, please come with us." As he spoke, he didn't care whether Shin Manting agreed or not. He shouted, "Someone come in and help." The old lady was sent to the hospital. After the emergency treatment, she was found to be fine. Shin Manting immediately realized that she had been deceived by the old lady. At the same time, he was furious and wanted to leave, but he was already surrounded by such a group of bodyguards, and it was difficult for him to resist. "Report, the old lady asked us to go back." "All right, let's go back." When Shin Manting heard that, she immediately stood up and said, "Since you're going back, there's nothing else for me to do. I'll take my leave first." However, the bodyguards quickly surrounded her and said, "Miss, I'm sorry. The old lady didn't order you to leave. Please come with us." Chapter 1642. The bodyguards looked at each other and seemed to have made a final decision. The leader said, "I'm sorry, Mississippi. Please come with us." "No." Shin Manting looked at them and suddenly screamed, "Help! Kidnap!" There were many doctors and nurses coming and going. After hearing the noise, they quickly looked over. The bodyguards were all shocked. They turned around and immediately covered Shin Manting's mouth. Shin Manting struggled violently, but she felt a pain in her lower abdomen. She frowned and her face suddenly turned pale. Shin Manting gradually stopped struggling, but her breathing became more rapid. The bodyguard suddenly felt that something was wrong and immediately let go. Shin Manting collapsed and hugged her stomach in pain. One of the doctors ran over and asked, "What's going on?" But soon he saw Shin Manting squatting on the ground with a painful look on her face. He said sternly, "Get out of the way. Let me take a look." The bodyguards didn't want to hurt Shin Manting, so they quickly moved aside. Shin Manting's stomach was really painful. Her face was pale and her forehead was covered with sweat. She was carried to the hospital bed. The doctor examined her and asked, "Where does it hurt?" "Stomach, baby." Shin Manting was in so much pain that it was difficult for her to speak. She grabbed the doctor's white coat with a pale face and said, "I haven't eaten all day. Is this the reason?" The doctor's expression immediately turned serious and said, "How can you not eat all day when you're pregnant? Send her to the obstetrics department." The news that Shin Manting was pregnant soon reached old Mrs. Shen's ears. Especially when he heard that it was very likely that she had not eaten for a whole day, he immediately blamed himself in his heart. When they arrived at Shin Manting's ward, she was sleeping comfortably. She seemed to be extremely vigilant. Her brows were tightly furrowed, and her whole body was curled up like a newborn baby. Her hands were wrapped around her stomach and her face was pale. She had changed into a patient's gown and was now on an intravenous drip. She didn't seem to be in good condition. Old Mrs. Shen walked forward and was very distressed. This child had been an orphan since she was young. It wasn't easy for her to live a good life, but she met her grandson. Although old Mrs. Shen didn't know what had happened between them, she could tell that Shin Manting was very repulsed by Shin Luo Han. In fact, it could even be said that he hated them. It seemed that old Mrs. Shen's entrance had disturbed the person who was sleeping soundly. Shin Manting curled up on the bed and opened her eyes. Shin Manting froze when she saw old Mrs. Shen. Then he looked around. It was a vast expanse of whiteness. The smell of the potion wafted over, and the back of his hand stung slightly. He was at the hospital. How long had it been? No matter how uncomfortable she was, she did not dare to come to the hospital. In her current situation, she could not afford the expensive medical fees of the hospital. Old Mrs. Shen sighed and said, "Manting, I'm sorry. I let you down." "Thank you." Shin Manting suddenly said, "Thank you for remembering me and being willing to look for me. I will remember your great kindness, but I really can't go back with you." "What?" Old Mrs. Shen was indignant. "Am I not good enough to you?" Chapter 1643. Shin Manting's pale smile was tinged with desolation. She said, "You can call me greedy, but I can't go back with you. It wasn't her home to begin with. She had to pay a price for everything she had. If that was the case, then the price would be too heavy. She didn't want it anymore. Everything she had dreamed of had vanished when Shin Luo and imprisoned her and treated her as a sex slave. She used to think that she was a princess. But later she found out that she was just a clown for others to entertain." "Manting." Old Mrs. Shen was heartbroken. "Shin Luo, and is in jail now. Hasn't your hatred for him subsided? Why are you venting your anger on me?" "Grandma, I didn't." Shin Manting's smile faded slightly. "Have you forgotten? My name wasn't Shin Manting." Old Mrs. Shen was shocked. Did she want to sever ties with their family? "What do you mean? This name is your granddaughter's name. This surname is also your granddaughter's surname. I just adopted it for a few years, Grandma." Shin Manting smiled faintly. "My original name was Zhang Meifong. I remember it, Grandma." "Shin Manting. Thank you for your name, but you should call me Meifong from now on. The Shin Manting in your household register will be considered dead. There will be no Shin Manting in the future." "No." Old Mrs. Shen was very determined. "Impossible. You can forget about it. I know what you want." Shin Manting smiled weakly. "Don't you want this child? I can give birth to it and give it to you. But after I give it to you, we'll part ways. The Shin family. The Shin family." To anyone in the imperial capital, these two words probably signified a new power and nobility. But to her, it was a nightmare that had haunted her for a long time. It was time to wake up from such a nightmare. Old Mrs. Shen's face turned green and purple. She said, "I don't just want a great-grandson. I want a granddaughter-in-law." "Shin Luo, and is already in prison. Are you asking me to go back and be a widow?" Shin Manting laughed. "I thought Shin Luo, and was the only selfish one in the Shin family. Turns out it's hereditary." Old Mrs. Shen was furious. She couldn't take it anymore and yelled, "Shin Manting! Zhang Meifong, Grandma!" Old Mrs. Shen was truly enraged this time. She had never seen Shin Manting so stubborn before. He was so stubborn that even she didn't know how to persuade him. He had no choice but to use his trump card. "This child of yours, be it a boy or a girl, is my great-grandson. I have 2 villas in the capital. They are very big and the market price is at least 50 million. 2 villas would be 100 million, and the price will continue to rise. You know the houses in the capital, so I'll leave these 2 villas to you, okay? Shin Manting sneered. In the beginning he was still trying to move his emotions and reason with her. Was he trying to tempt her with such a large sum of money? You can give it to Shin Luo, Anne's child. Of course. When old Mrs. Shen heard that Shin Manting had finally relented, she was overjoyed and said, "The child is yours." Shin Manting laughed. "If I give birth to it, I can give it to you. I can't afford to raise it anyway. But how do you know that it's Shin Luo, Anne's child?" Chapter 1644. Old Mrs. Shin hadn't expected Shin Manting to say that. She was stunned for a moment but quickly reacted and said, "This child must belong to the Shin family. It can't be wrong. Manting, you can fool me but you can't fool the heavens." Shin Manting felt her hair stand on end. After spending so much time with old Mrs. Shin, Shin Manting believed in it. It was just like how the old lady couldn't accept Yi Yuyu as her granddaughter-in-law. From the moment Yi Yuyu married into the Shin family, old Mrs. Shin began to reject her. No matter how big or small it was, as long as she could cause trouble for Yi Yuyu, old Mrs. Shen would be the first to rush forward. She was adamant that Yi Yuyu wasn't fated to be their daughter-in-law. She was fated to marry twice. In the end it turned out to be true. Yi Yuyu was now with Li Jinan. They were a couple and it wasn't long before they got married. Now that she heard old Mrs. Shen's words, she lost the courage to deny it. "Manting, what do I have to do for you to go back with me? Tell me. I'll do it for you no matter what. As long as you're willing to go back, I'm begging you." Her words were serious, but Shin Manting knew the old lady well. What she said was only an expedient measure. No one knew what the specifics would be. "Grandma, just give up. I'm grateful for your high regard. Thank you for coming to such a place to look for me, but I won't go back no matter what." "Manting, that place doesn't belong to me. Please go back." Old Mrs. Shin was disappointed to see that Shin Manting was determined not to go back. She stood by her side, unwilling to leave. She stared at Shin Manting for a long time before sighing and saying, "Shin Luo, and owes you." The verdict of the trial was out. Because of the recording, no matter how capable Guan Yanhong was, he couldn't reverse the situation. Shin Luo, and was acquitted in court, and the audience cheered. Mrs. Shin cried on the spot and hugged her husband excitedly. She shouted, "He's finally out. He's finally out." Shinjilia was also silently relieved. His eyes were fixed on the joyful Shin Luo, and in the dock. Following that, his gaze landed on Yi Yuyu and Li Jinan, who were in the row in front of him. He sincerely said, "Thank you both." When Yi Yuyu heard Shinjilia's question, she turned her head to look at him. This familiar face had helped Shin Luo, and pay off many of his debts when she was helpless. She smiled sweetly at Shinjilia and replied, "You don't have to be so polite." At the same time Mrs. Shin turned around and said to Yi Yuyu, "Yi Yuyu, thank you so much for this. I'm really grateful to you. If it weren't for you, Shin Luo, and would have to stay in there for 20 years. He's already in his 30s and he still doesn't have a child. If he were to come out in 20 years, would anyone still be willing to marry him?" The more Mrs. Shin thought about it, the more frightened she became. Her gratitude toward Yi Yuyu grew. Yi Yuyu suddenly found it funny. She couldn't help but think of Yi Tian. Shin Luo, and was not Mrs. Shin's child, but Mrs. Shin treated Shin Luo, and as her own. Chapter 1645. Yi Yuyu's emotions became even more complicated, but she was no longer sad. Looking at Mrs. Shin, Yi Yuyu smiled and said, "If it weren't for Shin Luo, and I would be the one in there now. I should be the one thanking Shin Luo on." As she spoke, Li Jinan stood up. His expression was calm as he looked at Yi Yuyu and said, "Let's go. It's time to return to Kingstown." "All right." Yi Yuyu stood up at the same time. She smiled at her former family members and said, "This is something I should do. Shin Luo, and wasn't a criminal to begin with, but he ended up in jail because he took the blame for me. Now I'll take it that I've returned Shin Luo, Anne's favor. I don't think we need to meet again in the future." "You, goodbye." Yi Yuyu smiled. Li Jinan was already holding her hand as she turned around. "Don't be so sure. No one can say for sure what will happen in the future, right?" Shinjilia looked at Yi Yuyu's back and said, "I still have to thank you, Yuyu." Yi Yuyu's footsteps paused, but she didn't turn around. Finally, under their gazes, she leaned on Li Jinan and slowly walked out of their sight. Shinjuya looked at Yi Yuyu's back and sighed. He quickly stood up and walked toward Shinluo-han. Shinluo-han had already been released from his shackles. He had never felt so close to his younger brother before. He walked forward and gave him a big hug. Shinjuya patted Shinjuya's back and said, "You're finally out. It's all thanks to Yuyu." The smile on Shinluo-han's face gradually faded. He looked at Shinjuya and asked, "Where is she?" "She left with Li Jinan," Shinjuya replied honestly. "Li Jinan treats her very well, and Yi Yuyu is already pregnant. After this incident, don't go looking for her again." Shinjuya replied honestly. Shinjuya had added that sentence himself. It was clear that Yi Yuyu's words had conveyed the same meaning. Shinluo-han felt conflicted. When he heard that, he lowered his head in defeat and said with a bitter smile, "She still hates me." "That's right. All these years I didn't trust her. If it were me, I probably wouldn't forgive someone like me." "Good that you know." Shinjuya didn't sympathize with him at all. He patted him on the back and said, "Grandma found Manting." Shinluo-han stiffened and asked, "How is she now?" "She is also pregnant." Shinjuya felt that the world was very mysterious. She didn't know many girls who were sick, but the few she knew all had good news. Yi Yuyu Lily Shinmanting, Shinluo-han felt conflicted. He lowered his head slightly and smiled bitterly. "She's pregnant. I've let her down." "Good that you know." Shinjuya's words were still the same. He snapped, "Why don't you count how many flowers you've ruined?" Shinluo-han sighed but said nothing. When Shinjuya saw his reaction, he didn't continue to criticize him. He patted him on the shoulder and said, "Go on, get changed and then go home." "Actually, I've thought a lot during this period of time." Shinluo-han said, "I'm sorry, but the only one I can make it up to now is Shin Manting." "You want to marry her?" Chapter 1646. When he heard Shinluo-han's firm answer, Shinjuya laughed and said, "That depends on whether she's willing to marry you. Grandma will bring her back." "You make it sound so easy." Shinjuya's tone was full of disdain as he said, "Now Sister Manting doesn't want to come back at all. Grandmother even promised to give her all her properties, but she insists on not coming back. Although I don't know what you've done to her, I can tell that it's definitely not something good. Otherwise she wouldn't have left in the first place and refused to come back even now." "Where are they now?" "In the hospital." Yi Yuyu and Li Jinan went straight to the hospital. They had already made an appointment for a prenatal checkup. After the checkup, the doctor informed them that the child was perfectly healthy. Soon they reached home and the two of them fell asleep in each other's arms. Time always passed quickly when one was asleep, so the two of them went to the Rong residence after waking up. Li Jianqian was already very used to the Rong family, and he got along very well with Rong Xian and Rong Haiyue. It was already very late when he left the Rong residence. At approximately 10 p.m., Yi Yuyu received a call from Yi Tian. Yi Tian's intentions were clear. She didn't bother with pleasantries. As soon as the call connected, she got straight to the point. "Now that Shinluo-han has been released, when will your boyfriend give me the $1 million he promised me? It's best to arrange a time tomorrow to trade face to face. Otherwise I'll have to make a trip when you guys go back to Connecticut." Yi Yuyu turned on the speaker. Li Jinan was sitting on the sofa reading, so he heard everything clearly. Yi Yuyu instinctively glanced at him. In the depths of his pitch-black eyes, a hint of surprise flashed across them. He reached out his hand and she quickly handed the phone over to him. Li Jinan seemed to have been prepared for that. He calmly replied, "Sure. Let's have lunch together tomorrow." "All right. I know a restaurant that's pretty good. I'll send you the address later." "No need, I've already booked a place. See you tomorrow at noon at the World Trade Center." Yi Tian's heart leaped with joy. She complimented him, "I knew you'd be a good person. See you tomorrow at noon." When he heard that, he didn't reply. He handed the phone back to Yi Yuyu. She quickly bade farewell to the person on the other end of the line. She looked at Li Jinan and asked, "When did you make the reservation? Besides, how did you know she would look for us?" "I don't know," Li Jinan said casually. He closed the book in his hand. "But now I know. She just wants money. That's simple." As Li Jinan spoke, there was a faint smile on his face. Yi Yuyu curiously leaned over and whispered, "What do you want to do?" "Nothing. Let's go take a shower." "Together?" "You go first." When Yi Yuyu heard that, her eyes turned into crescents as she wrapped her arms around his waist and said, "Together." Li Jinan lowered his head and gently nibbled on the tip of her nose as he said, "No, you have to go by yourself. Be careful not to slip." "I'm afraid. What if I slip and fall?" Yi Yuyu's fingers wandered around his waist. "That wouldn't be good." Li Jinan turned his head away. "That won't happen. I put a non-slip mat in the bathroom." Yi Yuyu was speechless. From the looks of it, Li Jinan had come prepared. She planted a kiss on his lips and said, "I'm going. Help me warm the bed." That. Chapter 1647. What a vixen. Li Jinan felt that life was very difficult, especially with a wife like her. It was already so difficult. She had only been pregnant for a month. What was she going to do in the future? When Yi Yuyu saw Li Jinan's indescribable expression, she was secretly pleased. She quickly entered the bathroom and took a fragrant shower. When she came out, she found Li Jinan busy with his computer. Because it was summer, Yi Yuyu was only wearing a tank top and a short skirt. She held a towel in her hand and rubbed her hair dry as she leaned over. After the shower, her body was not only fragrant but also warm. Li Jinan felt a faint wave of heat hit him in the face. He immediately looked at her. When he saw her dressed like that, the first thought that popped into his mind was, "She's not wearing anything underneath." With that thought in mind, his emotions, which he had finally managed to calm down, were once again fired up with excitement. "Damn it. That vixen. When she gives birth, I'm going to teach her a lesson." But now, a wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. He put the computer aside and didn't dare to say a word. He was afraid that she would take the opportunity to speak. He quickly slipped into the bathroom. Yi Yuyu's lips curled up. She felt a sense of satisfaction at being in control of her man. No wonder those tigresses like to control their men so much. It turns out that it's so fun. I'm afraid that I won't be able to escape from this man in the future. Yi Yuyu put down the towel in her hand. Her eyes quickly landed on the computer in front of her. The computer screen was lit up. On it was a chat between Li Jinan and Lawyer Yi. Both of them were men, so the way they spoke was more official. "Lawyer Yi, don't worry. I'll definitely resolve the matter satisfactorily." Li 3, "Thank you." Handshake, "Lawyer Yi, you're too kind." Yi Yuyu. She scrolled up the records and read them line by line. The more she read, the more shocked she became. That's what Li Jinan had in mind. Yi Tian arrived very early. When she arrived, Yi Yuyu and Li Jinan weren't there yet. However, when they entered the private room they were talking about, there were already people waiting inside. When Lawyer Yi saw Yi Tian, she quickly stood up with a smile and said, "Madam Yi, how are you? I'm Mr. Li Jinan's lawyer." As he spoke, he handed over his name card. Naturally, Yi Tian recognized him. When Yi Yuyu had been imprisoned, this lawyer had put in a lot of effort. "Hello, I'm Yi Yuyu's mother. Are they here yet?" Lawyer Yi nodded and said, "Mr. Li, there's a traffic jam on the road. Let's take a seat first." Yi Tian nodded her head. In a flash, he sat on the main seat. The way he looked at Lawyer Yi was a little condescending. Lawyer Yi did not mind at all. She turned around and took out a document. Lawyer Yi placed it in front of Yi Tian and said, "Madam Yi, we can first discuss the compensation for Mr. Li's car." Yi Tian was slightly taken aback. Chapter 1648. This was the first time Lawyer Yi had interacted with Yi Tian. He had heard from Li Jinan that she could be a difficult woman to deal with. However, this was the first time he had experienced the extent of her difficulty. When Lawyer Yi heard that, the smile on his face remained as formal as ever. He said, "Madam Yi, according to the law, your daughter and Mr. Li did not get their marriage notarized. Therefore, the relationship that you are talking about does not exist." "What a joke," Yi Tian said with disdain. "Didn't you see how much that rascal loves my daughter? It's only a matter of time before they get married. When that happens, won't their belongings be mine? Is that what Li Jinan told you to tell me?" As Yi Tian spoke, she had already come to a conclusion. She said, "That rascal won't do. He's so petty. It's just a car and it's not an expensive one. With a mother-in-law like that, what good days will he have in the future?" The smile on Lawyer Yi's face could no longer be maintained. Having been in this profession for so many years, he had dealt with all kinds of matters. However, it was rare to see a woman who could twist words and twist logic like this. After calming himself down, Lawyer Yi explained, "You might have misunderstood. Other than the fact that they didn't get married, there's another fact that I think you need to know." Yi Tian grew impatient. She waved her hand and said, "Spit it out. This car doesn't belong to Mr. Li Jinan. It belongs to his older brother, Li Beixing. So what? Yi Tian asked nonchalantly. In other words, Mr. Li Jinan still has to compensate his older brother for this business car that costs $1.8 million. However, you are the one responsible for this incident. Therefore you should be the one to pay for it. Tui? Pay for it, my foot? Yi Tian was furious. She shouted, I've already discussed it with Li Jinan. He will pay for it. Furthermore, he has to pay me another $1 million. I'm here today to collect the money. Don't try to fool me. When that bastard Li Jinan shows up, you'll know. When Lawyer Yi heard that, he said, Madam Yi, according to Mr. Li's statement, he does indeed have to pay you $1 million. It's good that you know. Shut up, you're so annoying. Lawyer Yi was a little angry from being yelled at, but he was still patient and said, but this car is already on the verge of being scrapped. The paint that you splashed not only damaged the exterior of the car, but it also smashed the windows and damaged all the seats inside. The market price of the car is $1.8 million, and the repair fee is a total of $110. This does not include the maintenance and repair services, so you'd better shut up. Li Jinan already promised me. I still have the recording here. Yi Tian took out the voice recorder in her hand and played the recording. His voice wasn't soft, so Lawyer Yi could hear him loud and clear. I, Li Jinan, have agreed to pay Madame Yi Tian the betrothal gift for my marriage to her daughter, Yi Yuyu, a total of $1 million. If I break my promise, may I be struck by lightning. These words carried a lot of weight. Lawyer Yi nodded and said, so it's the betrothal gift for Miss Yi. $1 million. What a huge sum. That's true. Yi Tian was clearly pleased with herself. He's my son-in-law. Chapter 1649. That kind reminder rendered Yi Tian speechless for a moment. As if to prove her point, Yi Tian pressed the play button on the recording again. After listening to it again, she realized that Li Jinan hadn't mentioned a single word about the car. Before Yi Tian could react, someone pushed the door open. Yi Yuyu and Li Jinan were brought in by a waiter, who quickly left. When Yi Tian saw Li Jinan, she immediately rushed forward and raised the recording pen. In a loud voice she asked, Li Jinan, what's the meaning of this? Li Jinan had just walked in. Faced with Yi Tian's questioning, it was obvious that this woman had hit a wall with Lawyer Yi. However, he pretended to be confused and asked in surprise, what do you mean? Yi Tian immediately played the recording. When Li Jinan heard it, he raised his eyebrows and retorted, that's what I said. Is there a problem? Seeing that Li Jinan was obviously playing dumb, Yi Tian's anger flared up and she shouted, you didn't mention anything about the car in that recording at all. Yeah, I didn't. Li Jinan's expression was calm and composed, which made Yi Tian even angrier. She roared, didn't we agree that I wouldn't have to compensate for the car and that I would have to pay $1 million as a betrothal gift? You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Li Jinan looked even more surprised and replied, when did I say that? I don't even know myself. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Yuyu and asked, did I say that? Yi Yuyu shook her head and replied with certainty, no. Yi Tian flew into a rage. Yi Yuyu, who exactly is your mother? Why are you siding with an outsider? I'm sorry, Madam Yi, but my mother isn't here. Yi Yuyu's eyes turned into crescents. What's wrong? Now that you're the one paying up, you're talking like that? Yi Tian's face contorted in anger. She raised her hand and prepared to slap him. Before the slap could land, it was stopped in its tracks by a large hand. Li Jinan looked at her coldly. He immediately grabbed her hand and gave it a shove. Hitting a pregnant woman is not a small matter, Madam Yi. If you really hit a pregnant woman, then your car compensation will be that simple. Lawyer Yi interrupted and said, I did a rough calculation. Because you have the recording as proof, Mr. Li definitely got the 1 million yuan. However, after deducting the repair fee for Mr. Li Beixing's car, you still have to pay 100,000 yuan. In other words, not only would she not get a single cent of the 1 million yuan, but she would also have to fork out 100,000 yuan? What a joke. Yi Tian's expression was ugly. She flung the voice recorder aside and roared, Li Jinan, you bastard. You dare to lie to me? You have to give me that 1 million yuan today or I'll die in front of you. Madam Yi, you're threatening my client. You'll have to compensate for emotional distress, Lawyer Yi said. Yi Tian roared, shut up. There's no such thing. You're extorting us. No, Madam Yi. This is the bill that the forest shop sent me. It's 11 yuan in total. I'll round it up to 1 million yuan. Chapter 1650. Seeing Yi Tian like that, Yi Yu suddenly felt sorry for her. No matter how much Yi Tian had gone overboard or treated her badly, at the end of the day she was still her mother. Yi Yu looked at Yi Tian and said, "There isn't much money left. I can help you pay it back." Yi Tian looked at Yi Yu. There wasn't the surprise or gratitude on her face that Li Jinan had imagined. Instead, it was a very ugly expression. It was as if someone had knocked over a jar of condiments. All sorts of emotions intertwined. It looked very complicated. When Yi Yu saw Yi Tian's expression, she suddenly felt that she had said the wrong thing. Yi Yu didn't know how Yi Tian treated other people. When it came to herself, Yi Tian didn't know what it meant to quit while one was ahead. Yi Yu steeled her heart and hid her emotions. With a cold expression she said, "In the future, I hope that you won't come looking for me again." Yi Tian's expression changed as she asked, "What do you mean by that? I'm your mother. You've never treated me as your daughter. Why are you saying such hypocritical things now?" Yi Yu looked at her with pity. "Yi Yu, you can't do this. You don't have to pay back the money you owe Anan. I'll pay it back for you. From now on, no matter what, don't come looking for me again. While you're still pretty, why don't you find a good man and marry him?" Yi Tian's breathing became more and more erratic. In the end she started to cry. Yi Yu was caught off guard by Yi Tian's sudden outburst. She was a little frightened. Looking at her mother before her, Yi Yu couldn't bear to see her like this. But she knew Yi Tian's character. A leopard could change its spots, but a leopard couldn't. If she didn't do that, Yi Tian would only go overboard in the future. Only by making Yi Tian feel her cold heart would she be able to be self-sufficient in the future. When Yi Tian changed her bad habit and temper, Yi Yu would bring her back to her side when she was old and look after her in her old age. That was the conclusion that she had come to after discussing with Li Jinan on the way there. Furthermore, she was the one who had suggested the idea. Li Jinan had approved it wholeheartedly. She couldn't afford to lose her cool at a time like this. But Yi Tian was completely unaware of their plan. Her cries grew louder and louder. Yi Tian's voice was almost hoarse as she yelled, "My daughter, how did you become like this? I'm your mother. Have you forgotten that when you were bullied at school when you were young, I went to avenge you? At that time, everyone laughed at me and said that I was an adult bullying a child. But I was willing to do it for my daughter. How did my daughter become like this now? Yi Yu, my daughter." Yi Yu leaned against Li Jinan. Her eyes began to burn. Finally she said, "Yi Yu. Mr. Li." Yi Yu said Yi Jinan of Yi. And Yi Tian was Yi Tian. Yi Yu. Yi Tian of. "All right, Mr. Li. I'll do my best." Lawyer Yi nodded his head and looked at Yi Tian with pity. But a pitiful man must have a hateful side. Chapter 1651. It wasn't just Lawyer Yi who thought that way. Even Li Jinan and Yi Yu shared the same thought. Just as Li Jinan was about to say that, Yi Tian suddenly raised her head and ran toward them. Yi Tian's momentum was too strong. Li Jinan narrowed his eyes and pulled Yi Yu back. He pulled Yi Yu to the back and looked at Yi Tian's menacing figure. He didn't move or give way. Yi Yu cried out in surprise. Before she could dodge, she saw Yi Tian's body slam into Li Jinan. Li Jinan's body swayed a little from the sudden impact, but he quickly regained his footing and stood firmly on the spot. Yi Yu felt her body sway slightly, but it was very slight. However, at the same time, Yi Tian let out a blood-curdling scream and fell to the ground. Yi Yu instinctively looked at Yi Tian and saw that she was crying even harder. She was sitting on the ground and pounding her chest. "Are you all right?" Yi Yu's heart ached. She touched the spot where Yi Tian had slammed into him. Her voice was anxious. Li Jinan's body was steady. He held her hand in his and said, "I'm fine." "I'm fine? Of course I'm fine." Yi Yu looked at his hand. The spot where she had slammed into him was already red. Something had even scraped off a large piece of skin. Yi Yu's voice carried a hint of sobbing. "Why didn't you move away? Did it hurt?" "I'm fine." Li Jinan was exasperated. He pressed her down slightly and said, "If I had moved away, wouldn't I have bumped into you and the child?" This was his first child. He couldn't allow anything to happen to it. He still had to depend on this child. The mother of the child had to be sent home. When Yi Yu heard that, she was so touched that she burst into tears. Her tears and snot gathered as she sobbed softly. Li Jinan held her in his arms and asked in a low voice, "Were you frightened?" Yi Yu cried even harder. Her tears were dripping onto his body. "Let's go. We're going back." Li Jinan held her in his arms and walked away. He turned to look at Lawyer Yi and said, "You settle it. Be careful." "Yes, Mr. Lee." He followed Yi Yu out. Just as he was about to find another place to eat, Yi Yu grabbed his hand. Yi Yu's heart ached as she said, "Let's go to the hospital to treat it. Look, he's bleeding." Li Jinnan glanced at it and didn't mind it at all. He tore off the skin and replied, "It doesn't hurt. When I was in the army, this little thing was nothing. I've even taken bullets before." She looked at him and pursed her lips. Large drops of tears rolled down her cheeks as she said, "You scared me." Yi Yu was even more afraid after hearing that. Li Jinnan quickly waved his hands and said, "Yes, yes, yes. I'm just scaring you. Don't cry. I'm hungry. Shall we go eat?" Yi Yu glanced at it. It was just a small scratch. It would be fine if she didn't deal with it. She nodded her head. When they got home after dinner, Yi Yu dragged him to a nearby pharmacy to have his wound treated. It happened to be afternoon. They couldn't be bothered to rest. They packed up and headed for the airport. It took more than 2 hours to travel from the capital to Kingstown. It was almost evening when they arrived. Yi Yu vomited all the way. She was on the verge of collapsing. Chapter 1652. Li Jinnan had just carried his wife to the taxi stand when he saw 2 familiar faces at the front of the line. "Look over there." Li Jinnan gently patted Yi Yu. Yi Yu looked up and saw Yi Chanshan immediately. Standing next to Yi Chanshan was a tall man. He was dressed simply and fashionably. From the side, his facial features were very strong. He had a head of clean short hair and fair skin. He looked very handsome. Who else could it be but Shinjilia? Yi Yu was a little surprised and asked, "Why is Shinjilia here too? Is he on the same flight as us?" "I don't think so." Li Jinnan saw that Yi Yu's eyes were burning with curiosity and teased, "Will Shinjilia become your brother-in-law?" Yi Yu's brows knitted together when she heard that. The thought of having to call Shinjilia brother-in-law made her feel a little weird. "I don't think so." Yi Chanshan was taking an afternoon nap when she received a call from Shinjilia. The B** only said one thing when he picked up the phone. "I'll be in Kingstown at 3. Remember to pick me up." "I'm not picking up." "Get lost." "No, I don't have a penny on me. I've never taken the subway before. I can't go back. You have to pick me up." "Get lost." Yi Chanshan was furious. She turned off her phone and hugged her pillow to sleep soundly. The weather outside was sunny and the sun was blazing. With the air conditioner in the room, Yi Chanshan felt so comfortable that she lost track of time. After she got up and washed up, she suddenly remembered that Shinjilia was returning to Kingstown. She turned on her phone and saw that it was already 5 o'clock. Yi Chanshan secretly clicked her tongue. Just as she was about to call Shinjilia, she received an incoming call. Without a doubt it was Shinjilia. Yi Chanshan felt a little guilty and weakly said, "Hello? Miss Yi, I've been standing at the airport for more than an hour." "Well, why don't you hail a cab and come back?" "I don't have any money on me." Shinjilia's voice was filled with grievance. "This month's salary is only coming tomorrow. I'm free after I bought the plane ticket." F***CK. Aren't you from a rich family? How could you possibly rely on your salary to make a living? Yi Chanshan obviously didn't believe him. "Who told you that I'm from a rich family? My father is a doctor and my mother is a professor. What kind of rich family am I?" Shinjilia's luggage was placed beside him in the airport's VIP lounge. He was enjoying the air conditioning as he sipped on a cup of coffee. "You think I don't know? Your father is the director, your mother is the head of the laboratory department, and your brother is a medical genius. How could you not have enough money to take a taxi? I don't believe it. Hurry up and come back. If you don't come back, then forget it. It's impossible for me to pick you up. Don't be so heartless, okay? I really didn't. Besides, I don't know how to take the subway. I've never taken one before." Yi Chanshan steeled her heart and said, "I'm not going." She immediately hung up the phone. Shinjilia was rebuffed and felt a little defeated. The young lady in the VIP room walked over with a red face and said, "Mr. Shin, where are you going?" "I'm going to get off work soon. You can take my car later." "But I don't have any money." Shinjilia lied without even blushing. "It's okay. Let's add each other on WeChat. Just treat it as my taxi fare. What do you think?" "There's no need. My girlfriend is coming to pick me up." Chapter 1653. When the young lady heard that, she was disappointed and walked away resentfully. Shenjilia turned around and picked up his phone to bombard Yi Chanshan with messages. Yi Chanshan couldn't stop herself from being bombarded. She replied angrily, "You're so annoying. Which airport are you at?" "Man." Yi Chanshan changed her clothes and quickly got up. When they arrived, they saw Shenjilia standing alone pitifully. He was carrying a suitcase, and his appearance alone attracted a lot of attention. When he saw that Yi Chanshan had arrived, Shenjilia immediately rushed over and said, "You're finally here. You almost killed me. Ouch, my legs." Yi Chanshan was a little embarrassed and said, "Let's go. I can't walk anymore. I've been standing for more than 2 hours. I haven't even stood for that long this month." Yi Chanshan replied, "Today is the first." Shenjilia greeted her with a smile and said, "See? Isn't there nothing wrong with this?" When she saw him jumping around so energetically, the embarrassment that Yi Chanshan had felt earlier dissipated. As they walked to the taxi queue, the two of them were planning what to eat later. When Yi Chanshan turned around, she saw a familiar person standing not far away. When she saw the person, Yi Chanshan's voice immediately stopped. When Shenjilia saw that, he turned his head to look as well. When he saw Li Jinan and Yi Yuyu, he was shocked. He quickly waved at them and said, "Hey, what a coincidence." When Yi Yuyu saw Shenjilia's natural demeanor, she found it even stranger. Yi Yuyu nudged Li Jinan and said, "Let's go over to them. Put me down and I'll walk there myself." Li Jinan acted as if he hadn't heard her and continued walking. The queue was quite long, so it took Li Jinan some time to reach them. When he reached them, it was their turn to get into the taxi. The four of them shared a car. Li Jinan, Yi Yuyu, and Yi Chanshan sat in the back while Shenjilia sat in front. "Sis, why are you at the airport?" Yi Chanshan felt an indescribable sense of awkwardness from the moment she bumped into them. Apart from living together, she and Shenjilia were just ordinary friends. What would Yi Yuyu think if I told her that a girl had come to the airport to pick up a man? For a moment, Yi Chanshan didn't know how to respond. All she could do was laugh awkwardly and say, "Why did you suddenly come back? Why didn't you tell me? I could have welcomed you back. I already made a deal with GM Lee. I'll treat you to dinner tonight. No one is allowed to fight me for it." With one look, Yi Yuyu knew that she was trying to change the subject. She subconsciously glanced at Shenjilia, who was sitting quietly in the front seat, and tactfully kept quiet. During the meal, Shenjilia naturally sat next to Yi Chanshan. Yi Chanshan naturally took the menu and placed her order. She didn't seem to mind that Shenjilia was sitting next to her. She pretended to ask casually, "Jilia, how long have you been working in Kingstown?" "Oh, it's been a while. More than a month," Shenjilia said as he poured tea. "Oh," Yi Yuyu replied. "Did the company arrange for you to stay in the dormitory?" Yi Chanshan stopped flipping through the menu when she heard that. Chapter 1654. Yi Chanshan's reaction was so dramatic that everyone turned to look at her. Yi Yuyu's eyes were filled with confusion. Li Jinan gave them a meaningful look. Shenjilia was a little confused as he looked at Yi Chanshan. It was obvious that he didn't understand what was going on. Yi Chanshan chuckled. Faced with the gazes of the three of them, she felt a little awkward. Her cheeks began to heat up. Yi Chanshan laughed dryly and said, "Isn't that the case?" As she spoke, she looked at Shenjilia. Shenjilia was still in a state of confusion. What's wrong with living together? It's not like we're in the same room or bed. When he saw Yi Chanshan's expression, Shenjilia immediately corrected himself and said, Yes." Yi Yuyu could tell that there was a story behind their exchange, but she couldn't figure out what the problem was. It was said that pregnancy made one foolish for 3 years. She had just gotten pregnant and her brain was already a little confused. Yi Chanshan lowered her head in silence. She flipped through the menu as her eyes darted around. Li Jinan picked up his teacup and took a sip. He looked at Shenjilia and said, "Have you been very busy lately? You've been running around in Kingstown. On one side is your home and on the other." As he spoke, his voice paused for a moment, unsure if it was intentional or not. This slight pause made Yi Chanshan's heart skip a beat. "On the other side is work." When Li Jinan finished speaking, Shenjilia crossed his fingers and said, "It's not too bad. I've been on leave recently, and there's nothing much to do in the hospital. It's just that I can't take it anymore running back and forth. When are you planning to get married?" The change in topic was a little harsh, but Yi Chanshan finally heaved a sigh of relief. "Soon. We'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau on Monday." Li Jinan had already planned it out. "I plan to act first and report later. I'll bring her home after we get our marriage certificate." Won't your mother kill you? Shinjilia laughed. I heard that your mother is very conservative. Does she know what's going on with Yu? She does. That's why I need to act first and report later. If you need any help, remember to call me. I'm very useful. I can even pretend to be a dead body. He turned to look at Yi Qianqian and asked, Are you sure you can do it or not? Have you ordered the dishes? Yi Qianqian asked. Yi Qianqian's mind was filled with thoughts, and she didn't even notice it on the menu. When she heard Shinjilia's words, her heart skipped a beat. Just as he was about to flare up, he sensed the gaze in front of him, so he suppressed his anger. She braced herself and looked at the menu in front of her. She frowned and said, Waiter, let's order. The waiter quickly came over. After Yi Qianqian ordered a few dishes, Shinjilia said, I'd like to have a steamed egg. Yi Qianqian had a look of disdain on her face. Steamed eggs every day. Won't I get sick of you? I just like it. There's also Yuxiang shredded pork. No? Even if you're not sick of eating it every day, I'll be sick of it. I want a dongpo pork and a bowl of olive soup, one for each person. All right, do you have pearl vermicelli? Give me one. When Shinjilia heard that, he turned to the waiter and said, Steamed eggs. The waitress seemed to know that Shinjilia's words were useless, so she looked at Yi Qianqian. Sure enough, Yi Qianqian quickly said, Ignore him. That's all. Help me up faster. Okay, please wait a moment. Chapter 1655. When Yi Qianqian saw the complicated expression on her sister's face, she immediately realized what was going on. What she had just said seemed to be inappropriate. Yu wasn't stupid. On the contrary, she was very smart. Her heart suddenly became uneasy. Yi Qianqian laughed dryly and said, Our company is close by, so we often eat together. You don't say this guy's cooking skills are pretty good. It's a far cry from his looks. When he heard that, Shinjilia was displeased. He immediately retorted, Hey, that's too much. What's wrong with my looks? I'm handsome and I can cook. Do you have a problem with that? Yi Qianqian gave herself a big thumbs up for changing the topic perfectly. When Yi Qianqian heard Shinjilia's defiant words, she turned her head and looked at him with contempt. She sneered but didn't say a word. Shinjilia was so angry that he felt a lump in his throat. He reached out and pretended to strangle her. But in the end he couldn't bring himself to do it. He let out a long sigh and lamented, Why is my life so bitter? I get angered by you every day and I have to serve you. It's so tiring being a man. Serve your grandpa, serve. When did you ever serve me? Yi Qianqian roared with her hands on her hips. Her face was full of indignation. Shinjilia sighed and said, Didn't I? I don't know who it was that carried you to the hospital when you were sick and vomiting. He even stayed by your bedside to guard you, afraid that you would die in your sleep. Bullsh *T. Yi Qianqian was infuriated. She reached out and pinched his hand. She yelled, You're the one who's going to die. Shinjilia grimaced in pain from the pinch. He quickly said, Isn't this the saying that beauties are unlucky? The prettier they are, the shorter their lives. I'm just worried about you. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she immediately retracted her hand. She looked at Shinjilia with a face full of gratitude. She touched the arm that she had just pinched and asked, Does it hurt? I'm sorry. I used too much force. Yu was speechless. Li Jinan was speechless. Yi Qianqian looked into the distance and said, Your worries are very reasonable. I feel that it's a blessing to have a friend like you in my life. Shinjilia replied, Are you serious? Yi Qianqian's expression immediately changed and she elbowed him. Yu and Li Jinan couldn't help but laugh out loud. When did you get sick? Is it serious? Yu asked as she picked up her teacup. It wasn't a big deal. He just caught a cold and was dehydrated. He was on a drip for a day and was fine after drinking some medicine. Shinjilia didn't think much of it. This guy's body is as strong as a bull. He's usually fine. F***ck, you're the one who looks like a cow. It's a good thing that I'm like a cow. I'm a man. You're the man. Shinjilia replied. I've always been a man. Yi Qianqian glared at him. Then you look like a woman. You're speaking incoherently. You just said that I look like a man. Don't you think it's inappropriate to change your words so quickly? I don't care, you're just like a woman. Shinjilia waved his hands in resignation and said, Fine. I look like a man, all right? Yi Qianqian didn't hear him clearly. When she saw his cowardly expression, she smiled proudly and said, That's more like it. Chapter 1656. Shenjilia's smug expression infuriated Yi Qianshan even more. The waiter soon served the dishes and Shenjilia was in a great mood. "Hello, sir. Your meal is here." Shenjilia picked up his chopsticks and said, "All right, let's eat. I'm starving. I waited for someone at the airport for more than 2 hours. Ouch, I'm dying from standing." Yi Qianshan retorted, "Tui, don't you know how to go back yourself? What's wrong with you to insist on someone else picking you up? I don't have any money on me. Look, I was the one who paid for your medical fees. What's wrong with you coming to pick me up?" Shenjilia spoke boldly and confidently. He held his head high and puffed out his chest. He didn't feel that there was anything wrong with his words. Yi Qianshan glared at him and said angrily, "Are you even a man? Does your future wife know that you're so stingy? Our door is made of wood. If I break it, we'll have to get a new one. How troublesome would that be? Besides, I was just casually mentioning it. How am I stingy?" Yi Qianshan sneered and turned her head to give him a look of contempt. She didn't say another word. "That's enough, both of you. How old are you? Why are you still so childish? What's there to argue about?" Yi Yu chuckled and picked some food for Li Jinan. "Try this." "Ouch, the sour smell of love." Yi Qianshan harumphed with a look of disgust. When Shenjilia heard that, the food that was about to reach his mouth immediately changed direction and went toward Yi Qianshan's bowl. "Try this." When Yi Qianshan saw that, she immediately frowned and said, "Get lost. You're so dirty." Shenjilia didn't seem to realize that he was being disliked. He smiled and picked up more food. As he picked up more food, he said, "I'm doing this to satisfy you. Look at you, an old woman who's been single for so many years. You're the old woman." "Hey, don't keep interrupting me. I'm not done yet. You don't have to say it. Nothing good comes out of your dog mouth anyway." Yi Qianshan rolled her eyes at him. Shenjilia replied, "F***ck. We're the same species. If I have a dog's mouth, then what's yours?" "Shut up." "This?" Shenjilia frowned and asked with a serious expression, "What kind of mouth is that?" Yi Yu couldn't help but laugh. Li Jinan glanced at them and casually asked, "Are the two of you living together?" Yi Qianshan's heart skipped a beat when she heard that. She instinctively glared at Shenjilia. Shenjilia wore an innocent expression on his face. He shrugged his shoulders in the face of Yi Qianshan's murderous glare. Yi Qianshan laughed dryly and asked, "Why do you ask?" What Li Jinan wanted to ask was what Yi Yu wanted to ask as well. When he heard Yi Qianshan's awkward expression, his eyes filled with curiosity as he looked at his sister. "I'm just curious. It seems like the two of you have a pretty good relationship." Li Jinan took a sip of the soup without lifting his head. "How could that be? You're thinking too much." Yi Qianshan lowered her head and ate a mouthful of food. Her gaze was somewhat evasive. "We just eat together occasionally." "Is that so?" Yi Yu didn't think that was all there was to it. From the looks of it, their relationship seemed to be pretty good. At the very least, it wasn't the first time they had bickered and teased each other like this. Chapter 1657. But if Shenjilia and Yi Qianshan ended up together, then their relationship would be a little complicated. She was Shenluo, Anne's ex-wife and Shenjilia's ex-sister-in-law. Although she married Shenluo, and didn't have a wedding, everyone in the Shen family knew her. So, if they knew that Yi Qianshan was her sister, what would those relatives and friends think? Yi Yu felt a little ridiculous, but when she saw how they were arguing, she felt that the relationship between them wasn't the kind of relationship she had imagined. Their words revealed that they weren't a couple. Since they weren't a couple, how could they live together? Yi Yu was convinced by her own thoughts. After thinking about it, she quietly ate her meal. When Yi Qianshan saw that she didn't ask any more questions, she secretly breathed a sigh of relief. God knows I was scared to death. Although I lived with Shenjilia, it wasn't a cohabiting relationship at all. He was just a landlord and a tenant. She didn't want to tell Yi Yu because she wanted to avoid unnecessary trouble. Yes, that's right. Yi Qianshan lowered her head and ate without saying another word. On the other hand, when Shenjilia heard that they didn't continue the topic, his heart was a little itchy. But if he said anything at this time, Yi Qianshan would probably explode. She quieted down, and the atmosphere suddenly became a little quiet and awkward. In the end, Shenjilia couldn't help but break the silence and asked, "Yu Yu is pregnant. Do you still plan to go on a honeymoon after you get married?" This happened to be the key question. Yi Yu didn't know, so she looked at third brother Li. Li Jinan had already considered it and said, Yes, but we have to wait until the belly is a little bigger and the fetus is stable. We can then prepare for this when we can wait for labor. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Yuyu and asked, "What do you think?" Yi Yuyu's heart was unbelievably warm. Yi Yuyu had never thought about these problems, but unknowingly, Li Jinan had already thought about all these things and had already made a decision. Such a man made Yi Yuyu feel very safe. Yi Qianqian looked at him enviously. She had never seen such a happy expression on Yi Yuyu's face. "That's great. Sigh. Why hasn't my Mr. Right appeared yet?" She bit down hard on the rice in her mouth. Her heart was filled with grief and indignation. After the meal they went their separate ways. Li Jinan hailed a cab with Yi Yuyu. Before Yi Yuyu got into the car, she reminded them, "Be careful on the road." "Don't worry. I'll be here." Shinjilia patted his chest and promised, "I'll send your sister home safely." "Thank you, then we'll go." "Goodbye." Shinjilia waved and smiled brightly. Just as the car carrying Li Jinan and Yi Yuyu drove off, Yi Qianqian turned around and punched him in the stomach. Shinjilia was hit so suddenly that he clutched his stomach and screamed exaggeratedly, "My God, you!" Of course Yi Qianqian knew that he was faking it. Her punch wasn't enough to vent her anger. She yelled angrily, "What the f***ck are you talking about in front of my sister? You almost gave yourself away." He looked at her innocently and exclaimed, "What are you doing? You didn't tell me that I can't tell her that we're living together." Chapter 1658. Shinjilia said matter-of-factly, "So what if we live together? It's not like we're going to bed. We're innocent. What's there to be afraid of?" Yi Qianqian felt her cheeks heat up when she heard that. She stared at him with wide eyes. Under the dim light, her cheeks were suspiciously flushed. "So what if we're going to bed? We're both unmarried. Even if we're really together, it's only natural." "You." Yi Qianqian didn't know what to say to refute him. Shinjilia's eyes widened as well. He squatted down and looked at her suspiciously. He frowned and looked at her strangely. He asked suspiciously, "Are you blushing?" Yi Qianqian was annoyed by his stare. She raised her leg and kicked him. She roared, "Get lost. You're so blushing." Shinjilia hurriedly covered his private parts with his hands and backed away with a look of lingering fear on his face. He patted his chest and said, "Oh my dear. That was a terrible kick. My future sexual happiness depends on him. If you ruin it now, what will I use in the future?" Shinjilia was stunned. Yi Qianqian turned around and stomped away angrily. Her face was getting hotter and hotter. Her mind was filled with the image of him covering his private parts. If he took off his clothes, oh my God. Her mind was full of dirty thoughts. Yi Qianqian shook her head and walked faster. It wasn't far from her house. It would only take her about 10 minutes to get there. Shinjilia saw her walking faster and faster. He grabbed his suitcase and hurried to catch up with her. He shouted, "Hey, don't walk so fast after eating. You'll get a stomachache. If it really hurts, I'm not going to help you." Yi Qianqian's footsteps slowed down. Something strange began to spread in her heart. It was silent, and it was hard for her to ignore it. Her heart was beating fast and her cheeks were burning. This was a sign that she was in love. Yi Qianqian suddenly realized that she was losing control of herself around Shinjilia. This kind of sign was not good. This guy is so frivolous and unreliable. What will I do in the future if I fall in love with him? No. Yi Qianqian, be more promising. Shinjilia looked at her from behind. The corners of his lips curled up slightly, and he quickened his steps to catch up. "Wait for me. My luggage is so heavy." Yi Qianqian snorted and said nothing more. Yi Qianqian soon arrived home. She fumbled for the key and entered the passcode. When she opened the door and entered, it was pitch black inside. Yi Qianqian turned on the lights and entered the house. She headed to the balcony to clean up and prepared to take a shower. Shinjilia glanced at her and said, "It's not good for your health to take a shower and rest so soon after returning from a walk." Yi Qianqian's face was still warm. She didn't dare turn around and said, "None of your business." After saying that, he entered the bathroom. The bathroom was separated by a glass partition. When Yi Qianqian showered, she even drew the curtain. After all, there was a man living in the house. What if he peeped at them? Shinjilia wasn't the least bit annoyed at being yelled at. On the contrary, he found her adorable. Shinjilia rubbed his nose. He thought he must have gone crazy. His masochistic tendencies were too severe. Shinjilia turned on the air conditioner and resigned himself to his fate. He opened his suitcase and began to pack his luggage. But before he could pack a few things, the light above his head suddenly flickered, and then the whole world went dark. Shinjilia, don't play pranks. That. Chapter 1659. Shinjilia was completely innocent. He shouted helplessly, "Do I look like that kind of person to you?" Yi Qianqian heard Shinjilia's voice from inside the bathroom. She looked at the darkness in front of her and felt like she was about to collapse. In other words, a power outage? She was only halfway through washing her hair. There were still bubbles on her body. Was she supposed to take a shower in the dark? Is there a power outage? I think so. I'll call the property management. The glimmer of hope that Yi Qianqian had in her heart was completely shattered. Ever since she was very young, she had night blindness. When it was dark at night, it was difficult to see anything. Especially in the dark bathroom, Yi Qianqian couldn't even see her fingers in front of her. Fortunately, the power outage didn't affect the natural gas. Yi Qianqian washed her hair in the dark and casually washed her body. Then she opened the bathroom door. Yi Qianqian didn't like to wear shoes when taking a shower. With one step, he stepped on the cold floor outside. The floor was wet and slippery. Yi Qianqian carefully felt for her clothes, but after searching for a long time, she couldn't find them. When she stepped on them, she found that she had stepped on a very elastic fabric. It was her underwear. Yi Qianqian was about to go crazy. It really was a perfect coincidence. How did the clothes fall to the ground out of nowhere? Yi Qianqian took a step back and bent down to pick them up. She didn't know what she had stepped on, but she fell back on her butt. But Shinjilia had just finished his call to the property management. When someone came for maintenance, he heard a loud noise coming from inside. It was obvious that she had fallen down. Shinjilia was so frightened that his heart skipped a beat. He quickly asked, "Are you all right?" There was no sound from inside. Shinjilia felt that something was wrong. He took a few steps forward and heard the sound of breathing coming from inside. He reached out and knocked on the door. "How are you?" Yi Qianqian sounded like she was about to cry as she said, "I can't get up. My feet hurt." When she fell down, her head had hit the bathroom door heavily. It was a real pain. But it was her ankle that hurt even more. The angle of her fall was strange. Her entire weight was supported by her twisted ankle. Now Yi Qianqian couldn't move at all. The moment she moved, she felt a piercing pain in her heart. When Shinjilia heard that, he knew he was in trouble. "Did you hurt your foot? Where does it hurt?" "Feet. Ankle. Can you stand up? Can I go in?" As he spoke, Shinjilia placed his hand on the doorknob. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she didn't have time to cry. She sniffled and shouted, "Don't! I'm naked." Shinjilia immediately retracted his hand. Scratching his head in annoyance, he asked, "Can you get up?" Yi Qianqian was about to go crazy. She sniffled and felt extremely wronged. He had never been so unlucky before. "What's with you? Can I help him up? Put on your clothes first. I'll go in and carry you later." Shinjilia looked around. It was pitch black. He couldn't see anything at all. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she looked around and inched toward the toilet. He reached out to pick up the clothes, but there was only a soaked underwear on the ground. The other clothes were nowhere to be found. How could she be so unlucky? "Yi Qianqian?" Shinjilia urged when he didn't hear a response. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.